Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became a Detective? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. There were a few rules that Yagi Toshinori was still struggling to instill into his students. Rules that seemed so trivial and mundane that it seemed a bit ludicrous that heroes had to learn it in the first place. The first was to take every task seriously, no matter how trivial it may have seemed. Young Bakugo especially struggled with that one, giving up on a task once it was completed to his satisfaction, or if it was deemed trivial, he often would make matters worse. The second rule was to be mindful of your stamina. This was a bittersweet lesson for Toshinori, because it was his disregard for this rule that left him with only an hour of hero time each day. He saw the same tendencies in a few of his students, such as young Kirishima and young Satoa. Finally, the third and most important rule was to always be aware of your surroundings. Ashido probably struggled the most with this, and Toshinori was struggling to find a way to teach the girl the rule before someone else had to pay the price of her inattention. These rules were cycling through Toshinori's mind when he woke up. After enough years of dealing with crime, a person gets almost a sixth sense for it. When Toshinori woke up that day, he could feel it in his bones that something bad was going to happen. He was already calculating how much hero work he would be able to accomplish, but a lot of it depended on luck. Toshinori just hoped that he would have time left when it was needed. Distracted by his worrying, Toshinori didn't notice the dip in the sidewalk. He barely managed to catch himself from falling, but the papers in his hands were not nearly as lucky. Cursing under his breath, Toshinori moved to gather the papers, but a pair of freckled hands were already collecting them for him. Toshinori looked up to see a pair of bright green eyes that looked vaguely familiar, eyes that held far too much recognition for Toshinori's comfort. Wordlessly, the boy shoved the papers into the hero's hands and scrambled away, giving Toshinori a better view of the retreating figure. He was short and clearly still a teenager, wearing a dirty hoodie over ripped jeans. Everything about him screamed that he was a hoodlum. The boy's appearance combined with Toshinori's uneasiness put the man on even higher alert. Something told him that that boy would have a hand in whatever was going to unfold. Throughout the day, he would have described the anxiety plaguing him as a pit in his stomach if he still had a stomach. His teaching suffered because of it, and young Bakugo wasn't shy about telling him so. Luckily, it wasn't just Toshinori, however, that felt off. No, a sense of looming danger hung over all the students in the hero course, one that the teachers felt even more acutely. Toshinori was making a lot of the same mistakes he'd made his first year of teaching. Luckily, his students had grown immensely since then and there weren't any incidents. They were in the middle of an exercise dealing with rescuing hostages when his phone rang. Seeing who was calling, Toshinori answered immediately. "What is it, Tsukachi?" "We've got a huge fight, Toshinori," the detective's terse voice informed him. "I've got an undercover detective in the middle of it all, so I need you and whichever heroes you think are best for the job, now. This isn't a job for your students." With that, Tsukachi hung up, only for a text message with an address to come through. Swallowing thickly, the hero called Nedzu. Before the principal could even really answer, All Might said, "I need you to watch my class. There's a situation that I was called into." After a few moments he added, "And Midnight and Eraserhead are needed as well." "Very well. I shall inform the other two and be there momentarily," Nedzu responded. And sure enough, before Toshinori could do more than explain the situation to his class, Nedzu was already strolling into the room. The pro-hero rushed to the parking lot where his truck waited, along with Aizawa and Namuri. Luckily, the two were okay with Toshinori's breakneck pace, and Aizawa was a good navigator. All Might knew he'd found the place when they drove up to a warehouse positively swarmed by police cars. Tsukachi was pacing outside the warehouse looking more stressed than All Might had ever seen him. Still in the truck, Toshinori transformed into his hero persona. Looking at Aizawa and Namuri respectively, he could tell that all three heroes were ready for whatever came. They moved towards Tsukachi uniformly, ready to be debriefed. Toshinori tried to keep his surprise from showing. The man was fretting. Turning to the heroes, Tsukachi said, "We have no idea what the situation is inside. We lost contact with our undercover detective. There's over 50 people inside, most if not all with extensive criminal records. Be vigilant. Don't get my boy killed." All Might shivered at the emotions in the detective's voice before accepting an earpiece from Aizawa. "I'll go in first," he was saying. "I'll keep you all updated on the situation so we don't just make it worse." The other two nodded and Aizawa was gone, disappearing into the warehouse. Toshinori stationed himself by one of the doors, fully prepared to burst in at a moment's notice. Then he listened. "Okay, I'm getting close to the main fight." "It doesn't sound as violent as I expected," crackled Aizawa's voice. "I'll have a visual soon." All Might whispered the update to Tsukachi, whose stress was palpable. Both men stood at attention, not daring to speak. "They're at a ceasefire," Aizawa said. "The two leaders are already talking things over to end it all without bloodshed. It's all because of some kid with green hair." Upon hearing that information, Tsukachi breathed in a sigh of relief. "I don't know how the kid does it. I'm guessing the kid is our undercover detective. He's amazing, he's gotten everyone to stop fighting but he still hasn't blown his cover," came Aizawa's voice. All Might couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The two were going on 3 years of teaching together, and he had never heard the man give such high praise to anyone. "I take it he's one of yours?" All Might asked Tsukachi in a low voice. "Our youngest detective yet," the man said proudly. "Midoriya is the best analytical mind we have. It's a good thing his mother doesn't want to move, or he would have been poached by some other district already. Offers are still pouring in for him." "What kind of quirk does he have?" "He seems to have handled this all incredibly smoothly," All Might said curiously. "He's actually quirkless," Tsukachi said blandly. "Years ago he had his heart set on being a hero but apparently he was involved in an incident. He tried to help out, but the pros just berated him and one even told him to keep his dreams attainable. It honestly almost broke the kid, but whoever that hero was made one of the biggest mistakes of their lives. Midoriya may be quirkless, but he's one of the most determined and skilled people I've ever met." A chill ran down All Might's spine as he remembered an incident years ago with a scrawny green-haired boy. Was it his words that had nearly broken the child? Surely that couldn't have been the boy that had just impressed Eraserhead so deeply. He was far too young to be a detective, if All Might remembered correctly. Where was that child? Toshinori probably should have kept better tabs on the boy who knew his secret. Aizawa's voice broke All Might from his ponderings. "Send in Midnight. If she's stealthy enough we should get this resolved with minimal injury." "Got it." "I'm coming in," Midnight said into the earpiece. Shortly after, however, Aizawa gasped. "What's going on, Eraserhead?" Toshinori demanded. "Someone's using their quirk. I can't find them and—" The audio was overtaken by static, confirming the feeling in Toshinori's gut that everything was going too well. "Eraserhead? Eraserhead? Midnight?" All Might could feel his heart slamming in his chest. When neither hero answered him, Toshinori said, "Someone's using their quirk in there, I'm going in." Tsukachi moved to protest, but All Might was already barreling through the doors with his signature laugh and catchphrase. It was just then that the earpiece started working again. "Mighty All Might, we almost had it," Eraserhead was hissing. All Might didn't know what all the fuss was about as the situation seemed to be in hand. Thanks to Midnight's quirk, almost all the men were unconscious, and those that weren't were swiftly rendered useless by Eraserhead. "A job well done, fellow heroes," All Might said with a booming laugh, a laugh loud enough to cover the sound of a gun being ped. "Move!" A young voice called before something collided into Toshinori, jolting the man before a gunshot rang across the warehouse. Static seemed to fill Toshinori's ears as he felt time slow down. The thing, or person, rather, who had collided with Toshinori collapsed onto the hero, something warm and wet seeping onto him. Looking down, Toshinori found a head of green hair that contrasted with the blood that was beginning to cover both him and the boy who had just taken a bullet for the #1 hero. Coughing wetly, the boy almost fell to the ground before Toshinori remembered himself and caught the boy, gently lowering him to the ground. In the background he heard the telltale sounds of Midnight taking care of the gunman. But right now, the boy's life depended on Toshinori's assistance. For the first time in years, Toshinori wished that he had his cape, any loose fabric he could rip off to staunch the bleeding. As it was, he had no option but to use his massive hands to press down on the boy's abdomen, praying to some higher power that he was helping. But the boy's breath was still coming out as violent gasps of air, his green eyes darting around, unseeing. All Might's stomach sank as he recognized those same green eyes and freckles he'd been wary of that same morning. What was that gunshot? Tsukachi demanded, rushing in after Toshinori. Seeing the boy on the ground, the man froze before growling, "I want restraints on every person in here that isn't one of us. We need an ambulance now." All Might flinched at the ferocity in his old friend's voice. Police officers poured in, complying with the man's every order, though many hardened upon seeing the boy in Toshinori's arms. Orders given, Tsukachi collapsed beside the boy, ripping off his jacket to try and staunch the bleeding, which was infinitely more helpful than Toshinori's hands. "Midoriya, stay with me," the detective begged. "Just keep breathing." Finally, those green eyes found something to focus on as the boy looked up, latching onto the form of the older detective. When he did speak, the wheezes were barely recognizable as words. "Trying to, sir," the boy said, pausing to cough. To their horror, drops of blood sprayed out with each cough. "Love her. Kid, I order you not to die," Tsukachi said seriously, pressing even harder on his jacket. "I will not explain this to your mother. You have to keep fighting. You know, always follow orders," Midoriya rasped, quirking his lips into the barest trace of a smile before his eyelids fluttered shut. Toshinori swallowed thickly, feeling like this was somehow his fault. The bullet had been meant for him, he knew, and this child had intercepted it, and based on their interaction, this child was Tsukachi's detective. There were fundamental rules that are so logical that one wouldn't think that heroes needed to learn them. The third and most important rule pounded through his head, and he could practically hear the voices of his students critiquing him the same way that they would critique one another in an exercise. Why was there anyone still awake to attack? Aizawa would ask in that steely voice. Ida and Yaoyorozu would fight to analyze the situation first, but in the end Yaoyorozu would win. There hadn't been sufficient time for Midnight's quirk to fully spread throughout the room, and All Might's entrance brought in more airflow to disperse her quirk, allowing the villains to further resist. When he mistakenly thought the situation was taken care of, he made enough noise to allow the villains the element of surprise. And which rule was broken? Aizawa would ask, staring Toshinori down so he would know exactly what he had done. "Ooh, I know!" Ishido would shout, jumping up and down. "It's my rule, the third and most important rule." Toshinori had let his guard down, foolishly unaware of his surroundings. And just as he always warned his students, All Might was not the one who paid the price. Indeed, instead it was paid by his closest friend's protégé. 3 years ago. It only took a matter of minutes for Midoriya Izuku's dream and entire plan for his future to be shattered. He had spent the first 12 years of his life surrounding himself with everything he could find about heroes, devising various ways to become one without a quirk. Izuku's dream was the dream of many, but his motivation was considerably more pure. Rather than seeking fame and fortune, Midoriya Izuku merely wanted to help people, to use his smile to reassure people in the darkest of times, remind them that the world still held light. But in the boy's darkest time, his hero failed him, offering neither verbal reassurance, nor the smile he was famed for. Midoriya Izuku did not die that day, but his sense of purpose did. The boy stumbled away from the rooftop, silently wondering if he should heed his classmate and stumble off of it instead. Tears he didn't realize he'd shed coursed down his cheeks as he pondered the truth of his hero's identity, as well as all that All Might had told him. Without realizing, the boy's legs had carried him to yet another crowd, a villain fight. It didn't seem like much of a fight though, and it felt empty to him. Then he took in the details of the fight, the villain who was all too familiar and the red eyes pleading for help, red eyes that Izuku could never forget. The sludge villain had Kaken. Before Izuku knew what he was doing, his legs carried him forward, slinging his bag at the sludge villain's eye, his one vulnerable spot. The villain recoiled, giving Izuku just enough leeway to start pulling his classmate out of the sludge. For the second time that day, a single punch from All Might took down the sludge villain, bringing immense relief to the crowd. People murmured amongst themselves, acting as judge and jury over what had just happened. What was that scrawny kid trying to accomplish? He just made more work for the heroes, a particularly venomous woman asked. I think he just wanted attention, another woman said. Some kids are so pathetic. Every instinct was telling Izuku to run, leave this place, but the cruel words froze him in place. What do you think you're doing? A rough voice asked, an equally rough hand grabbing the boy by the arm. Looking up, Izuku was peering into the face of Death Arms. The man was a passable hero, but Izuku could have told him numerous ways the man could maximize his quirk. Unfortunately, the man was held back by his idolization of All Might. I just wanted to help, Izuku stammered. If you're going to interfere, you better have the quirk to back it up, Death Arms growled, shaking Izuku a bit. For real, kid, Mount Lady interrupted. I'm just starting out. Do you want my career to be ruined because of you? Mount Lady, Death Arms, stand down, said a much more logical voice. Izuku raised his eyes to see none other than Kamui Woods, who gently put his hand on Izuku's shoulder. Listen, kid, your intentions were noble today. I understand that you were just trying to help out your friend, and that's admirable. But it was incredibly dangerous. We've trained for this for years, we're the experts, so until you have the training to joining us, trust us to handle it, okay? The hero's words were kind, but more than anything Izuku wanted to go home. Disgustingly enough, he could still feel a layer of slime coating his esophagus, and part of him wanted to cry even though he didn't have any tears left. A part of his mind whispered that he should ask Kamui Woods if he could become a hero, but All Might himself had already counseled him against his dream. It was generally unwise to blatantly ignore advice from the world's top hero. The image of his mother apologizing to him flashed through his mind. He'd been told it was an impossible dream his entire life, but it was finally starting to sink in. Izuku Midoriya really was just a useless Deku. Mind numb, Deku stumbled away from the scene, aware of the heroes still yelling at him, but not caring. His legs started on the way home, everything in him screaming to go home, go to where it was safe. He was stopped on his way by the last person in the world he wanted to see. The other heroes already lectured me, Izuku said before All Might could say anything. Thank you for saving me and Kaken. It's clear now that I'll never be a hero. All Might was taken aback. The change in the child was drastic enough that for a moment he wondered if this was the same boy. Young man. Oh, Deku said quietly, green eyes dull. Your secret. It's safe, I swear I won't tell anyone. Izuku shuffled on, leaving a shocked All Might in his wake. Gone was the determined young man that had impressed All Might, and the pro-hero couldn't help but feel that he had had a hand in it. The hero debated with himself for a moment before deciding it was best to just leave. He wasn't equipped to deal with the boy's emotions, after all. At least, that was what he told himself. His second, or did that count as third, encounter with All Might barely even registered in Deku's mind. Almost nothing registered in his mind. He was nearly home when he heard pounding footsteps on the sidewalk beside him. "You?" Bakugo howled, fury emanating from him. When Izuku turned around to face the irate blonde, it was an explosion that greeted the boy. It was the biggest explosion Bakugo had used on him yet, burning his face and chest as well as throwing the boy to the ground. What was that? Bakugo seethed. Do you think you're better than me or something? When Izuku didn't respond, the blonde kicked the fallen boy. Answer me. Izuku opened his mouth to say something, but another voice rang out. Katsuki Bakugo. Step away from my son now, Inko Midoriya yelled, exiting her house looking like the embodiment of rage itself. The blonde boy stiffened, unused to being caught or reprimanded. Red eyes glaring at the smaller boy, he spat, You better watch yourself, Deku. Remember you're worthless. I know, the boy said faintly, finally glancing up at his former friend. Bakugo stared for a moment, shocked by how dead the boy's eyes were. Before, they always held that stupid, inextinguishable shine to them. But now Izuku Midoriya sat before him, broken. It wasn't nearly as satisfying as he thought it would be. Inko caught Katsuki by surprise, bodily shoving him away from her son. "Stay away from Izuku," she snarled, collecting her dazed and injured child into her arms. "Come on, Izuku, you need to go to the hospital." "I'm sorry, Mom," the green-haired boy mumbled, but he was promptly shushed. "No, Izuku," Inko said. "I'm sorry you've been dealing with this alone until now. You shouldn't have hidden it from me, but it's in the past and it's time to move forward." The mother and son shared plenty of tears as they took a cab to the hospital. The cab driver discreetly wiped away a few tears himself when he heard the boy begin recounting the day's events. When they reached the hospital, he waved away Inko's payment, instead wishing Izuku a quick recovery. Luckily, inside the hospital, they weren't kept waiting for very long. A kind female doctor came into the waiting room only minutes after they had signed in, calling, "Izuku Midoriya?" Izuku pushed himself to standing, feeling close to fainting from the pain. Following the doctor, a host of worries plagued his mind, the foremost being the explanation he would have to give to yet another person. He was exhausted in all aspects of the word, wanting nothing more than to collapse into his bed and sleep for days. Thankfully, the doctor was kind, listening attentively and only asking the questions she absolutely had to before beginning her examination. Other than an unpleasant throat swab, the procedures were quick and painless. The kind woman gave Inko very detailed instructions on what to do, which was good because Izuku retained none of it. The mother and son decided to walk home, and Izuku kept shooting, discreet, worried glanced at Izuku. Most of the walk passed by in relative silence until Inko asked, "How long has this been happening?" "The bullying, I mean." Izuku merely shrugged, which only served to make Inko more rude. The two trudged in silence once more. "We're going to move," Inko blurted out. "And we can enroll you in online school if you want. You're smart enough you could probably finish early." "I'm sorry I didn't see it until now, Izuku, but you've been living the wrong life. I know my son, and he's not meant to waste away being bullied. My son is the kindest, bravest person in the world, and he's meant for a life where his smile makes other people feel better. Whatever you decide to do, Izuku, I fully support you." Tears were slipping down the woman's cheeks as she made her bold declaration. He didn't know when it had happened, but tears were slipping down Izuku's cheeks as well. The first emotion he'd felt in hours sparked in his mind, and then he was flinging himself at his mother, sobbing. "I'm never going to be a hero," Izuku sobbed, clutching Inko even tighter. "You're already a hero," Inko said, though tears of her own. "You're my hero and so much more. One day you'll see what I see." True to Inko's word, the family of two soon moved to a modest house on the other side of town. It was closer to where Inko worked, a quieter neighborhood, and most importantly, it was free of one Bakugo Katsuki. Once Izuku had recovered mentally and physically, he began online school and found that he enjoyed it immensely. Izuku had always loved learning, but it was indescribably better when it was unhindered by classmates who didn't feel he belonged. It was also an online school that allowed the students to set their own pace, and as such Izuku blew through it in record time. Now he could fixate on any given subject he wished and learn absolutely everything that the school's database had to offer, all without being called a freak. For once, life was peaceful. Any issues with Kaken had been buried definitely unresolved, but stamped down until they couldn't bother Izuku. Inko had wanted to take the Bakugo family to court, but Izuku had talked her out of it. He had never told his mother the full extent of the bullying, so he was able to downplay a lot of it. Strangely enough, he had forgiven the boy for everything, and he just couldn't shake the feeling that Kaken had the potential to be a great hero one day. Even if that wasn't Izuku's future, he didn't want to take the chance away from his former friend. As much as Izuku knew that Kaken could be good, he didn't trust it to just happen. Izuku would be watching his hero career closely. If Kaken didn't improve himself, he would have Izuku to answer to, one way or another. Izuku enjoyed his new life, at least for now. He knew the charm of it would likely fade sooner rather than later, and that such a solitary lifestyle would only hurt him in the long run. He had accepted that heroism wasn't a possibility for him, but nothing had diminished the desire to help people. He still felt the overwhelming need to prove the world to be a safe place. It had been a tough pill to swallow, but now Izuku saw that. Everything that All Might had said was for the boy's safety in the long run. A part of Izuku's mind whispered that he could have been a hero regardless, but maybe finding a different path wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. He would just have to do some exploration before he decided what that path would be. As he settled into his new life, Izuku quickly found that if he didn't force himself into some sort of schedule, he forgot to eat and sleep. He also figured that blowing through an entire semester of schoolwork in 3 weeks might not be the healthiest option. With this in mind, Izuku began working towards being healthier. He had never been very athletically inclined, but he realized that if he were stronger, faster, it would be easier for him to help people in the future. It began with the boy going on runs. At the beginning, Izuku felt like he was going to die, but each day he ran a bit farther than the last, and a bit quicker as well. On one of these runs, he came across a dojo that advertised several different fighting styles. Remembering all the times Izuku had felt completely defenseless in his life, the idea of the dojo stuck in his mind. He hesitantly brought it up to his mother, who agreed more readily than Izuku had expected. A few days later, the two Midoriyas walked into the dojo to find the owner cleaning up after the latest lesson. He was an older man who wore his scars and his wrinkles with equal amounts of pride, a lifetime of fighting evident in his every movement. Izuku gasped before immediately throwing himself into a bow. "You're the former pro hero Valiant. It's an honor to meet you, sir." The man chuckled, a bit surprised. "It's rare that I meet anyone your age that has even heard of me, let alone recognizes me not in costume. What can I do for you, boy?" At Inko's nudge, Izuku eased out of his bow, admiration still clear on his face. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, Valiant, sir. I would like to be trained at your dojo if you're okay with that, that is. If not, I'm sure I could find somewhere eventually, but this really is my first." The torrent of words calmed when Valiant placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Well, young Midoriya, I'd like to get to know you a bit and then we can decide if my dojo would be a good fit for you." Gesturing for the two to follow him, Valiant led the way to a small office, where the former pro hero listened to Izuku stammer about himself, offering complete, if somewhat rambling answers. Overall, though, Valiant couldn't help but be impressed with this boy's character and determination, as well as his mind. "I would love to take you on as one of my students, young Midoriya. For training purposes, though, I need to know what your quirk is," Valiant said, absent-mindedly beginning paperwork for the boy. At the man's words, though, both Midoriyas froze in place, afraid of the reaction their answer would provoke. In a small, quivering voice, Izuku nearly whispered, "I'm Quirkless." Valiant's years of training as a pro had taught the man how to disguise his emotions, so there was no surprise on his face when Izuku spoke up. He had fully expected a mental quirk of some kind with how perceptive the child was, but if anything he was more intrigued after learning that Izuku was quirkless. Clearing his throat, he said, "That makes my job easier. It can be difficult to find a fighting style to suit a certain quirk, but this means that you have an entire world of possibilities before you." It warmed Valiant's heart to see his newest student straighten up, beaming brighter than the sun itself. But the image of Izuku's tragic resignation to his fate made the retired pro feel like his heart was in a vice grip, squeezing tighter than he thought possible. When a knock sounded at the door, Valiant abruptly realized what time it was. His interview with Midoriya had taken longer than necessary, and now his next student was here for his private lesson. Rising from his seat, Valiant opened the door to his office. "Thank you for being patient, Ojiro. I would like you to meet my newest student, Midoriya Izuku." Izuku craned his neck to see the boy around the teacher, a blonde boy that looked overwhelmingly kind. He would have been a bit plain looking if it weren't for his massive tail. He immediately smiled at Izuku. "It's nice to meet you, Midoriya. Is this your first time in martial arts?" At Izuku's nod, the boy said, "Well, I look forward to sparring with you." The smaller boy nodded, inwardly lamenting that Ojiro would likely refuse to talk to him once he found out that Izuku was quirkless. Until that day, however, he planned to bask in the boy's kindness as long as it lasted. Soon enough, Izuku's martial arts lessons became a bright spot in his weeks. Valiant's quirk was a slight enhancement of his physical abilities. He was stronger, more flexible and dexterous than the average human being, but it was just barely beyond what a quirkless person could achieve. Valiant had never been in the top few heroes, but he had been successful, and Izuku had always respected the man. He had also followed Valiant's hero career closely, as the man was as close to a quirkless hero as Izuku had ever found. Just as Izuku respected his teacher, the man grew to respect the boy in return. He had instantly been drawn in by how bright and genuine Midoriya was. However, Valiant was consistently impressed by how the boy managed to excel at everything he was shown, not through some innate ability, but because the boy tirelessly practiced everything he was shown. Midoriya had a whole host of others who he impressed as well. In order to give his students variety, Valiant often brought in other instructors to introduce different fighting styles. Many of these were pro-heroes who Valiant had helped train years ago, and almost every instructor asked about Midoriya. Gunhead was especially impressed by the boy. That was not to mention the other students, who were inspired by the boy's determination and drawn in by his kindness. And so it was in Valiant's dojo that Izuku slowly found a place to be comfortable, a place to belong. The day that Izuku had dreaded came and passed without incident, the other students barely reacting to the fact that Izuku was quirkless. Ojiro, Izuku's closest new friend, especially didn't care. He had merely shrugged and said, "I hope you don't expect me to go easy on you, because I won't." And true to his words, Ojiro had held nothing back, leading to a particularly spectacular loss. The new neighborhood also quickly adopted the mother and son. Inko made the best food and gave freely, and Izuku could usually be found offering help of some kind, be it weeding Mrs. Tachibana's flower beds or watching Mrs. Kyoto's children when she needed to run to the grocery store. But Izuku wanted more. He felt like there was something he needed to be working towards, and the feeling haunted him day and night. One day a few weeks into his new training, the feeling was almost tangible within Izuku, distracting him as he sparred with Ojiro, and the distraction was enough that Izuku didn't see the tail coming, leaving the green-haired boy sprawled on the floor, staring at the ceiling. The amicable blonde immediately dropped his fighting stance. "Are you okay, Midoriya? You normally see that move coming from a mile away." Izuku stoved himself to his feet with a groan. "I'm fine, just a little distracted." "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, it's fine. I'm actually happy lately, like happier than I've ever been. Things are really good right now." Izuku smiled bitterly. The UA entrance exams are soon, right? When I was younger that was my dream." "Midoriya, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. But you could probably still." "I'm fine, Ojiro. That dream is officially dead. I just miss the sense of purpose it gave me, you know? I know I want to do something in life that helps people, I just don't know what." After thinking a moment, Ojiro said, "You know, Midoriya, I saw something about EMT classes being offered a few blocks away. It's probably not what you want to do with the rest of your life, but you would be learning valuable skills that would make you more equipped to help people." As Izuku pondered his friend's words, he visibly brightened. "That's a great idea, Ojiro. I'll have to look into that tonight. And I probably won't see you again until after it's over, so good luck on UA's entrance exam. I know you'll do fantastic." Valiant shook his head as his two favorite students parted ways. Those boys were good for one another, they each balanced the other out. Somehow Ojiro was able to slow Midoriya's hectic mind so that others could understand what the boy was trying to say to others, and Midoriya brought Ojiro further out of his shell than ever before. The two were on different paths in life, but Valiant could feel that they were both pursuing greatness. That night Izuku brought up the possibility of EMT classes to Inko, and once more the mother was easily persuaded. It was rare enough that Izuku asked for anything, so when he did, Inko always found a way to make things happen. Besides, medical knowledge was always a good thing to have. The two decided that they would go to get the necessary paperwork and such tomorrow afternoon, once Inko was off of work. The next morning, as Izuku was on his run, he contemplated how much life could change in 10 months. He had slowed down his studies to a more casual pace, and as such he was almost finished with the schoolwork for his first year of high school. Once Izuku had a little more direction on what he wanted to do as a career, he calculated that he could have at least one college degree finished by the time that most kids his age were graduating high school. His prospects were infinitely better than they had during his time in middle school, and Izuku was starting to believe that he might be able to make something of himself after all, with or without a quirk. The biggest change, however, was that he was happy. Every step that he took was a step closer to helping people. He had friends now and teachers that legitimately cared about him. Izuku's happy train of thought was not to last, however. He was first alerted by a tiny cry of distress that he almost didn't notice. Cautiously halting, Izuku monitored the area around him. He was in a less familiar part of town, an old neighborhood that was largely abandoned. In fact, aside from the distress call, Izuku didn't see any evidence of any other life. Trying to get his breathing under control, Izuku heard yet another sharp cry, making it easier to trace the sound. As Izuku crept towards the alleyway he suspected was the source of the sound, a rough voice growled, "Shut up! You know this is your home now." A child's wailing nearly stopped Izuku's heart, but it also covered the sound of his approach. Peering around the corner, Izuku found a large cardboard box that hosted a multitude of stained rags that resembled a sort of nest. Cans and plastic food packaging littered the ground, and a man with matted hair stood with his back to Izuku, looming over an only marginally cleaner child. "I want to go home," the girl cried, her tears making tracks in the dirt that was caked on her face. Izuku started in surprise. He recognized the girl. She had been a hot topic on the news for the past 2 days because she had mysteriously gone missing, suspected to be kidnapped. There were no witnesses to it and no leads on the disappearance. The news had proclaimed that the search for the child was beginning to look hopeless that very morning. But here she was, living in an alleyway in an abandoned part of town. His mind was running 1,000,000 miles per minute. Izuku knew he should call the police, but he couldn't be overheard, and he refused to take his eyes off of the child. She had suffered enough already. All of Izuku's hastily thought-up plans were for naught, however, as the captor, enraged with the girl's crying, moved to slap the girl. Unable to stop himself, almost unaware he had even moved, Izuku jolted forward, catching the man's hand before it was able to make contact. In a practiced gesture, Izuku twisted the man's hand behind his back with as much force as the boy could muster. Initially the man yelped in pain, but it didn't take him long to recover. While Izuku had been training conscientiously, form lost out to sheer strength when the man brutally slammed Izuku into the brick wall of the alley. Stars dotted his vision as he let go of the man's arm solely from pain, and Izuku barely registered the meaty fingers that wrapped around his throat. "Listen here, kid," the man growled. "You're going to leave and forget that you ever saw us if you want to live. Got it?" Izuku's eyes focused on the little girl, who was sobbing now, pleading, "Please, I promise I'll be good. I just want to see Mama again." He was aware that his breathing was becoming more and more shallow as those fingers pressed harder and harder on his throat. Feeling faint, Izuku realized that he may have had technique on his side, but the man undeniably had size, experience, and strength on his side. "So, are you going to walk away?" the man demanded, his fingers seemingly prepared to crush Izuku's esophagus. Out of desperation, Izuku nodded frantically, his fingers clawing at the man's hands. When they did loosen, Izuku gasped, drawing in all the air he could take in. Falling limply to the ground, the small boy coughed, every movement causing more pain. "Consider yourself lucky," the man said, roughly grasping the girl by her forearm. "And don't bother looking for me. With my quirk I can easily crush your skinny neck, and I won't hesitate. Besides, by now disappearing is my specialty. No one can find me unless I want them to." Part of Izuku wanted to doubt the man, but he had been able to abduct a child without a single eyewitness. He was shaking, and he knew he couldn't take the man in a real fight. Izuku practiced diligently, but 9 months of training could only lend him so much help. If he fought and lost, it would only end up worse for the girl, and possibly with him dead. He only hoped the man wasn't very fast. Struggling to his feet, Izuku was grateful when the man didn't look back. Taking a deep breath, Izuku geared himself up before pushing himself to run at full speed, ducking down lower to the ground to catch the little girl by her torso, relatively easily ripping her from the man's grasp. The man shouted in indignant surprise, but Izuku was already sprinting with the girl cradled close to his chest, adrenaline pushing his exhausted legs faster than he'd ever run before. He felt like he couldn't breathe deeply enough and he was feeling a bit lightheaded, but still Izuku murmured comforting phrases to the child as he held her even closer, fully aware that the man was gaining on them every second. 3 more blocks. That was all Izuku had to make it. 3 more blocks and they would be safe. Ironically, this was the most deserted Izuku had ever seen this part of the city. He had quickly left the abandoned neighborhood behind. Now he was only half a block away from his destination, and there was no one to hear the man's enraged yells or Izuku's cries of help. It was then, when he had momentarily slowed down to turn a corner, that he felt a grasping hand barely brush the collar of his shirt. Yelping at the closeness of the man, Izuku threw himself forward, grateful that the enraged man was too intent on Izuku to realize where they were going. His arms ached from the weight of the child when Izuku crashed through the doors of the local police station. Once in their safe haven, Izuku immediately set the child on the ground for fear of dropping her. It was for the best, as milliseconds later he was tackled to the ground by her captor. Those same crushing hands wrapped around Izuku's neck, and the boy's last fuzzy thoughts were an apology to his mother. His vision swam in and out of focus as a veritable legion of police officers were surrounding him, taking the man away in H&FFS. Somewhere the girl was crying and the man was yelling and his throat hurt and all the officers were trying to talk to him and... Quiet, an authoritative voice rang out, reaching even Izuku. Then someone was helping him into a chair, and the little girl who he had carried was clinging to him, more tears trailing down her cheeks. Then someone else was talking to Izuku, and then the pain lessened. It was still there, but Izuku no longer felt like he was going to pass out, and his mind resumed a fraction of its normal function. A man in a trench coat was looking at Izuku, concerned. "I'm Detective Tsukachi. I apologize about the chaos, but would you like to tell us what's going on?" Izuku blinked a few times, his vision still slightly fuzzy. "I'm Midoriya Izuku. I was on a run when I heard a child in an abandoned part of town. I saw this girl with that man that was attacking me, and she seemed really scared. Then I recognized her as the girl on the news, the one who went missing a few days ago." Detective Tsukachi looked up sharply from his notes, and Izuku idly observed that the man would likely have been described as plain-looking, just like Izuku himself. But then the man was talking, and Izuku had to remind himself to listen. "You mean the girl that disappeared without a trace, Tanaka Kimiko?" "That's my name," a quivering voice piped up, and every eye turned to the child in Izuku's arms. "I couldn't remember her name," Izuku said. "But her captor noticed me and attacked, telling me to forget I saw anything. I knew I couldn't fight him, so I grabbed her and ran here." He smiled down at the child that was holding on to him with a death grip. "I know I'm probably in trouble, and it was kind of a stupid move, but I regret nothing." The detective shut his notebook with a snap. "On the contrary, Midoriya, want to commend you. You were a hero today, and you should be proud. You exercised your best judgment, and because of that I get to call a distraught mother and tell her that Kimiko is okay. And it's all due to a teenage boy." When the man's words sank in, Izuku's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Absolutely. I need to give your mother a call as well, but before I forget, did you use your quirk at all?" "I'd hate to have to write you up for illegal quirk use," Tsukachi said with regret. "No," Izuku said slowly. "I'm quirkless." As the words left his mouth, Izuku found himself looking down. He couldn't stomach the thought of seeing the detective's look of pride turn to disappointment as he realized that Izuku was defective, a waste of space. "That makes things easier, then. Chin up, kid, that just makes what you've done even more amazing. If you ever had the inclination, I think you would make an amazing detective." The last part was added just before Tsukachi swept out of the room, unaware that he left behind a wide-eyed boy with a growing sense of hope and a new dream blossoming in his hazy mind. Kimiko gradually calmed down, flashes of her personality shining out from under her fear and confusion. She listened to the officers and for the most part she did as they asked, but she absolutely refused to move very far from Izuku, who was still dazed, but happy nonetheless. She was a cute child underneath the dirt, with wide brown eyes that still held too many tears. From what the officers could ascertain, she wasn't very injured, only a handful of scrapes and bruises. Izuku felt an odd protectiveness towards her, but he supposed it made sense that the feeling was foreign. He'd never been able to protect people other than replacing them as a target before. So when a grubby hand anchored itself in Izuku's, he couldn't help but melt a little inside. Apparently Kimiko loved stories, and so at his prompting she started telling him a rambling tale that could vaguely be recognized as Cinderella. She was in the middle of telling Izuku the details on Cinderella's carriage when the door swung open. "Where is she? Where's Kimiko?" a frantic voice rang out. Eyes wide, Kimiko snapped to attention. "Mama?" A small smile settled on Izuku's lips as he carefully set the child on the ground. He observed as the two rushed towards each other, meeting in the middle of the station in a flurry of hugs and tears, each almost disbelieving that the other was there. All present police personnel watched, smiling witnesses to the reunion. Many of the officers nodded to Izuku, acknowledging what he had done. Despite the pounding in his head, Izuku couldn't help but grin widely, tears streaming down his face. Matching tears on her cheeks, Kimiko's mother clutched her daughter with desperation. "Where was she? How did you find my baby?" Detective Tsukachi smiled. "You have that boy over there to thank. His name is Midoriya Izuku, and he's the one that found and saved Kimiko." Gasp came from the doorway. My Izuku did what? It might have all been in his head, but Izuku would have sworn that all of his pain dulled slightly when his mother walked in. Inko immediately rushed to her son, worry etched on every line of her face. "How are you feeling, Izuku? Do you need anything?" The battered boy shoved himself to his feet, throwing his arms around his mother. "Mom, I can still help people. I want to be a detective." Inko was clearly surprised, but she merely patted her son's back. "You'll be an amazing detective." Kimiko's mother walked over to the Midoriyas, Kimiko still tight in her grasp. "I'm so sorry you got hurt, but thank you for protecting my baby." "Can never. The woman promptly burst into tears, losing any semblance of composure. "The police near my house told me to prepare to have her brought back in a body bag. You saved me from planning my daughter's funeral alone." Unable to help herself, Inko gently embraced the other mother. "It's okay now, your daughter is safe now. I don't know how you've been able to function. I can only imagine how I would feel if my Izuku had been taken." Kimiko took the opportunity to latch once more onto Izuku's leg, giggling when he ruffled her hair. He turned his attention to her mother once his own mom finally released the emotional woman. "I'm Tanaka Amaya," Kimiko's mother said with a wobbly smile. "I can never thank you enough for bringing my daughter back to me. I just need to know where and how you found her." He had the full attention of both mothers, as Inko clearly needed to know what had happened as well. Swallowing, Izuku once more tried to focus his hazy mind. "Where to start? I was on a run, and I went farther than usual. I wandered into an abandoned neighborhood when I heard a little kid. I thought that didn't seem right, so I went to investigate. I saw Kimiko and a man that seemed really suspicious, and it was obvious that they had been kind of living in this alleyway. After a minute I recognized Kimiko as a missing child, so I knew I had to do something. The man saw me and we fought. He won, and left me there, but I couldn't just leave her. I'm pretty sure it was all adrenaline, but I got up and grabbed her before he noticed I was there, and then I ran as fast as I could to the police station. I barely made it in the doors and set Kimiko down when he caught up to me." Inko gently touched the angry bruise marks on Izuku's throat, anger burning in her normally sedate green eyes. In a steely voice, she asked, "Did the police catch the man?" "They pulled him off of me and cuffed him right then and there." Amaya bit her lip. "I'm truly sorry that you got hurt, but I'm even more grateful that you saved my daughter. How can I ever repay you?" Izuku immediately began shaking his head. "You don't need to repay me, I just wanted her to be safe. It must have been so scary for Kimiko, I can't even imagine." As he dissolved into a fit of mumbling, Inko and Amaya traded contact information, each promising to keep in touch with the other. Kimiko, however, still hugging Izuku's leg, tugged on the material of his pants to catch his attention. "Big brother?" Nearly choking, Izuku weakly said, "Yes? Will you visit me? I want to see you again." Looking into those wide brown eyes, Izuku found himself crouching down next to her and saying, Yes, of course I will. And with those words, it was inevitable. Both of these small families were inextricably tied together. It wasn't long after that Kimiko had to be questioned herself, now that she was calm enough to be questioned, and the Tanakas left after a last embrace filled with tears. Both Midoriyas were holding back tears of their own, but Izuku felt like he was going to pass out. Inko noticed and pulled the nearest police officer aside. My son needs to see a doctor. Can we leave yet? I believe Detective Tsukachi already got his testimony, and we have his contact information. He should be good to go, the police officer said. In fact, I'll take you myself if you would like. Oh, we would hate to be a bother, Inko said nervously. It's no trouble at all. In fact, you'll be doing me a favor. I get bragging rights for helping the local hero, the officer said with a bright smile. I'm Officer Saito, by the way. It's a privilege to meet you, Midoriya. Izuku started to follow his mother and the officer to the car, but something was bothering his hazy mind. Hospital? Medicine? Then he gasped. Mom, today's the last day to sign up for those EMT classes. They're only open till 5. You want to take EMT classes, kid? Officer Saito asked curiously. Izuku nodded vehemently. I want to be able to help as many people as I can. Well, you're in luck. They had to relocate those classes to our spare room here at the station because the normal building is getting renovated. If you leave the paperwork with us, we'll make sure it gets where it needs to be, Saito said with another bright smile. She disappeared into the precinct and reappeared with the necessary form and a pen. It barely took a minute for Izuku and Inko to fill everything out, and then Saito rushed into what Izuku suspected was Detective Tsukachi's office. Days later, Izuku would be thrilled to receive an email accepting him into the course. What he would never know, however, was that he had been accepted under duress. The instructor had hesitated allowing in a 15-year-old, but a smiling detective had kindly informed her that if Izuku was denied, they would have to find somewhere else to hold the class. Izuku had been smiling, excited at the prospect of EMT training when his eyes rolled in the back of his head and his knees buckled. He was only saved from hitting the ground hard when Officer Saito stepped in at the last moment, catching his limp body thanks to her stellar reflexes. Saito cursed. He must have some internal bleeding. Let's go. Inko helped load her son into the police car, with barely enough time for her to climb in herself before it sped off. The sound of sirens filled the air as Saito tore across the city in record time. Izuku drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of being carried. Then he was on a bed with a familiar doctor talking to his mom and Officer Saito. Pieces of the conversation made it through the haze of his mind, but he didn't have the mental clarity to piece it into a clear scenario that would come later. Know if this is from bullying again? He's been in the hospital for bullying? Do you have names? Fractured ribs and nasty concussion. He passed out because... Stay awake. Exhaustion, I think. Make sure. Then even the voices faded to nothingness, and for once Izuku didn't even dream. Sleep was a comforting absence of everything until he woke naturally, immediately greeted by each and every one of his aches and pains. He had no way of knowing how much time had passed, or even what year it currently was. When he groaned, there was a series of frantic footsteps before his bedroom door burst open. Izuku, baby, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a bus, he said, cracking a small smile. But pretty good, all things considered. Grunting, the boy sat up, swinging his legs out of the bed. Luckily there was a nurse with a minor healing quirk working yesterday. She was able to shorten your recovery time to a few days instead of a few weeks. Oh, and Valiant still wants you to come to the dojo today. He said you could work on meditation, Inko said. Do you want me to stay home with you? I can call in to work. No, I'll be fine, Mom, Izuku promised. I do feel a lot better. He refused to make her guilty over his guilt at the prospect of making her miss work. If you're sure, Izuku? Oh, the doctor's orders are that you're not allowed to do anything more physically demanding than walk a few blocks at a time. I will find out if you push yourself, and I will let Valiant decide what to do with you, Inko warned before kissing his forehead. I love you and I'm proud of you. Taking his mother's words to heart, Izuku didn't do anything to push himself. After feeling how his body protested every movement, He knew it wasn't wise to tempt fate. Instead, he pushed his brain to the limit. Izuku calculated that if he really worked hard, he could finish high school in a little under a year. If he started now, he could have a couple degrees in a little over 2. Maybe less, if the degrees he had in mind had enough shared classes. In the meantime, he would continue his work at Valiant's dojo and EMT training. He itched to go back and research a multitude of police cases that he had briefly heard of when he was younger, but ultimately ignored because they didn't involve heroes. Now Izuku wanted to know everything, all in the pursuit of becoming the best detective he could. Plan in place, Izuku lost himself in his schoolwork, only remembering to eat and leave for martial arts because of the alarms he had set on his phone. When it was time, Izuku walked leisurely to Valiant's dojo, enjoying the summer day around him. Stepping into the dojo, however, Izuku hadn't expected the chorus of shouts that surrounded him. "Little Midoriya! It's our hero! Hey kid, can I have your autograph?" Izuku felt his face blush bright red as he was surrounded by his friends. Hey, everyone. Give Midoriya space, a gruff voice said. The crowd of boys parted to show Valiant smiling down at the student. "Welcome back, my boy. As the others warm up, I would like to speak with you." Almost magically the other boys fell into their spots, running through the actions that were second nature to them by now. Izuku followed Valiant to his office, sitting down at the man's insistence. The former pro-hero smiled at him fondly. "Young Midoriya, do you know why I accepted you as my student? I can see that you don't. When I first met you, I could sense a deep despair, as well as a deep hope. I don't know the full reason for your despair, but I don't need to. You've begun finding yourself, finding your purpose as well as your worth." "Thank you, sensei," Izuku said, trying with all of his might not to cry. "Your desire to help others is a noble one, Midoriya. But be careful to help yourself as well. Keep improving so you don't have to be hurt in the process of sparing others. Sometimes wounds are inevitable, but I won't have you destroy yourself." "Yes, sensei." "Today you meditate," Valiant said seriously. "I sense you still hold onto an incomplete image of yourself. Come to terms with who Midoriya Izuku is. You are Quirkless, yes, but you are so much more." Now Izuku nodded, tears finally escaping. "Yes, sensei." "Midoriya, wait." Izuku stopped, turning to find a friendly face pursuing him. "Oh, Ojiro. I forgot to ask you how the entrance exam went." The quiet blonde moved in next to Izuku with a smile. "It went better than I expected. Now I just have to wait for my results." "I'm sure you got in, you're amazing," Izuku exclaimed. "I don't know, there were some amazing quirks. I thought I was doing okay, but there was this kid with an explosion quirk that took out so many robots that the rest of us almost couldn't find any to fight." Ojiro smiled a little sadly. "I knew I wasn't going to be the best, I just hope I did well enough to get in." "What's done is done, young Ojiro. I'm sure you conducted yourself with honor," Valiant said, appearing in the doorway of the dojo. "You as well, young Midoriya. Both of you go home rest. You've earned it." As the two boys walked home, a few blocks away one detective Tsukachi sat in his office, rubbing his eyes from the mound of paperwork that sat in front of him. With a sigh, he set down the paperwork and started clicking through the news, looking for the latest events All Might had been involved in. The announcement that the #1 hero was going to be a teacher at UA had overshadowed all other news, including the recent kidnapping and recovery of Tanaka Kimiko. Toshinori's face filled the screen again and again, similar stories of the blonde's bravery and heroism filtering through. It was paranoia that led Nao Mesa to periodically check the news to see that his good friend's secret was secure. He wanted to protect Toshinori, yes, but it was also a matter of national security. He didn't know what made him do it, but something possessed Nao Mesa to click on a video from months ago. It was a video of Toshinori saving a boy from a sludge villain. Tsukachi had been particularly busy with the case at that time, so he hadn't watched the video very closely. The video opened with the image of a blonde kid struggling in the grasp of the sludge villain while a number of pro-heroes hung back, looking helpless. Somewhere behind the camera there was a scuffle and then a flash of green darted towards the villain, a scrawny boy flinging an oversized backpack directly into the villain's face. Naomasa paused the video with shaking hands, staring at the screen. Slowly standing, he slipped out of his office. Saito, Nakamura, I need an opinion on something. What you got, boss? Saito asked, immediately snapping to attention. Just come watch this. The two officers shuffled in, crowding around the computer where the detective had started the video over. I remember this, Nakamura said. All Might saves the kid, but wasn't there another? No. You're kidding, Saito whispered. It can't be. Thank goodness, I'm not crazy. You see Midoriya too? Tsukachi asked. We need to train that kid and give him a badge, Nakamura said. He's going to be amazing. Why don't we? Saito said playfully. They let baby heroes have provisional licenses, why not us too? She had asked the question in jest, but Tsukachi froze in place, his mind racing. A provisional officer. I have some paperwork to do, he said, shooing the other two away. Picking up the phone, once the other person answered, he said, It's Detective Tsukachi. Who would I have to talk to about potentially begin a new program? Days later found the Midoriya family in Izuku's room at an hour yet untouched by the sun. However, both Midoriyas were wide awake, and Inko stared intently at the screen of her son's laptop. And you swear you didn't pull any all-nighters? Just the one, Izuku swore, his smile blinding. And you haven't missed your martial arts of your EMT classes? Not a single one, he chirped. Oh, by the way, tomorrow Gunhead is teaching the class, and Valiant told me that he wanted me to have a session with just Gunhead and Ojiro, so I'll probably be home late. His mother's green eyes were still fixed on the computer screen where two emails were displayed side by side. One was a notification of Izuku's completion of his first year in high school, barely a week into what would have been his first semester. The second was an acceptance letter to Japan's most prestigious college as well as a full scholarship. They had been particularly impressed by Izuku's quirk analysis, and when they had learned his age, the head of the quirk studies department had demanded that the school accept Izuku and made sure he attended, whatever the cost. They would let Izuku have as many majors as he wanted, provided that one of them was quirk studies. He could complete almost all of his work online, he just had to visit the actual campus every few weeks. The university would even pay for his commute to Hosu. With this, another piece fell into Izuku's plan. He was finished with EMT training. Today was just a ceremony of sorts to celebrate their completion. He had to admit he was a little sad it would be over. He had started off on the wrong foot with his instructor for some reason, but after enough time the two came to a mutual respect. However, the worst part of his class being over was that he no longer had a reason to stop by the police station. Maybe he could bring taiyaki for the entire station as a thank you for so many things. He could then casually bring up the idea of observing the job of a police officer. After all, he couldn't make a habit of showing up at crime scenes like he had with villain fights. At this point all of the police officers knew him, and they would reprimand him for not taking his safety into account. For the first time in years, Izuku was genuinely excited about his future. So can I do it, Mom? Can I start going to college? Finally pulling her eyes away from the emails, she smiled. It would be a waste to refuse. Just don't push yourself too hard. Send me that professor's email, I'll set up a meeting with him so we can get paperwork done and talk over all the details. Izuku beamed, thrilled beyond words. Today is your EMT training certification, isn't it? My little boy, a certified EMT at 15 years old. Izuku, I'm so proud, Inko said, tears filling her eyes. I wish I could make it to the ceremony. I could take off work if you wanted. No, it's fine. I have people to support me now, and I already know that you support me. Today is a really important day at work for you, so good luck. It's my turn to support you, Izuku said, hugging his mother tightly. Have a good day at work. Kissing his forehead, Inko left, letting his door quietly close behind her. He waited a few moments before Izuku closed both emails, opening a folder on his laptop, a nagging feeling plaguing him. It was early, really early. He had already been on a run, and the sun had yet to rise. Dialing a number that was becoming more and more familiar, anxiety fluttered in his stomach. The police officers had been nothing but kind to him, but he didn't know if he could handle having his new dream crushed just like his old one. Mizudafu Police Station, Officer Sasaki speaking. What can I do for you today? Swallowing thickly, Izuku stammered. Hi, this is Midoriya Izuku. Little Midoriya. How are you? Fine, I was looking at some old news articles and I noticed a pattern. There are 3 villains that have escaped being caught until now, and based on their old patterns, I think they're going to strike today. That said, Izuku held his breath, terrified of how Saito was going to react. He held a deep respect for the officer, and he knew he couldn't take it if she laughed him off. Explain further, little Midoriya. Wait, let me get the detective on the line. Fainter, as if Sasaki was holding the phone away from her mouth, he heard, Naomasa, your son is on the line with important information. What are you talking about? I don't have. Midoriya is waiting. Almost immediately the other line picked up. Detective Tsukachi speaking. And so Izuku blurted out all of his suspicions and evidence, including who the villains were, where they were most likely to be, and the best way to detain them. Which heroes would you recommend us calling in? The detective asked. Izuku thought for a moment. Kamui Woods for the first, then Mount Lady for the second, and for the last. Midnight. They're villains that work together, so even though their attacks would be separate, they would be coordinated with one another. It's best to have heroes that can capture them quickly. Thanks for calling in, Midoriya. You've been a huge help, the detective said, before hanging up. While Izuku buried himself in schoolwork, Detective Tsukachi had been busy single-handedly setting up a course and test for provisional police badges. Hearing the boy's deductions validated Tsukachi's efforts. Looking at the evidence Midoriya had laid out, Tsukachi could kick himself for how obvious it all was. Except it wasn't. Even with years of experience and a degree in criminology, Tsukachi didn't think he could have put all of this together. Contact the heroes he mentioned, Sasaki, Tsukachi ordered. I'll contact the police stations in charge of those areas. When you're done, call in Kondo and set up a surveillance of the 3rd area, Midoriya suggested. You're really trusting of the imaginings of a 14-year-old boy? Officer Mori asked with a sneer. Mori had slowly been alienating himself from the rest of the police station with his open dislike of Midoriya. He's 15, Sasaki hissed, jabbing his ribs with an elbow. Besides, you have to see this kid. He's different than anything you've ever seen. You've always been a bleeding heart, Sasaki, he said, slightly glaring at the petite woman. No, she's right. Whatever he ends up doing, Midoriya is going to change the world, and I want to watch it happen, Tsukachi said, an unusual gleam in his eye. Now go, our time is limited. The 2 officers saluted before leaving, and as Tsukachi made the phone calls he needed to, he couldn't help but smile to himself. No one would realize the full ramifications of that day. Detective Tsukachi had no way of knowing that with those 3 villains in police custody, his good friend Yagi Tashinori would not expend all of his energy before arriving to the school. In fact, he had enough time to teach Class 1A, and still time to spare. There was no way to know of the untold fear and injuries that Class 1A was spared from, all because the number 1 hero was at the USJ from the very beginning. The main villains escaped, yes, but the whole incident was minuscule compared to what it could have been. Although slightly shaken, the class walked away almost virtually unscathed, and Izuku's new dream seemed all the more closer. Despite everything that could not be known, there were 2 irrefutable things. The first was that on that day, Midoriya Izuku began to truly accept himself for who and what he was. The second was that this day was the first time Midoriya Izuku met Uraraka Ochako. Ochako took another shuddering breath. It was over. Why was she still trembling? Class 1A was spread out in front of the USJ while police officers and medical personnel milled around, assessing wounds and taking statements. A sense of chaos still reigned among the students despite Ida's efforts to get them into some semblance of organization. Briefly, Uraraka pondered that he would make a good class representative. But that was the only thing that really registered in Ochako's mind. She could barely hear over her racing heart and ragged breathing. She was startled into awareness, though, when something dropped onto her shoulders, not alarming, but unexpected. She blinked at the orange blanket that now covered her shoulders, then at the boy who stood in front of her. I'm sorry to startle you. I tried talking to you earlier, but you weren't responding. You were going into shock. He smiled slightly, running a hand through a forest of green hair. Off in the distance an explosion sounded, a sure sign that Bakugo was fine. The boy in front of her flinched, but he wore an expression of recognition? Ochako's mind was too addled to properly decipher the boy in front of her. You need to sit down, let's go over to the shade, the boy suggested, pointing to the right direction. It was a little cluster of trees that would simultaneously provide shade and block her from the sight of others. It was also still within the boundaries of where they could go, making it the perfect haven. Maybe the boy had ulterior motives, but Ochako got the sense he was giving her privacy to deal with her emotions, and she was grateful beyond words. It was also hard to believe that this boy could have anything but the best intentions. At first glance he was around her age and pretty plain-looking. His hair was messy, and freckles were liberally sprinkled across his skin, but his eyes were a deep green that for whatever reason felt incredibly comfortable to Ochako. She found herself looking into them, blaming it all on the shock. He situated her comfortable on the ground, seemingly not noticing her attention. Does anything hurt? Thinking for a moment, Ochako shakily raised her right arm. I did something to my wrist. I don't know if it's broken. The boy gently took the appendage in his hands, gently rolling back her sleeve. I'm an EMT, by the way. I'm not just some random kid. Your wrist isn't broken, it's just a pretty nasty sprain. Give me a second and The boy trailed off, his eyebrows furrowed in concentration as he procured a fabric bandage, expertly wrapping her fingers with nimble fingers, his lips silently moving. Ochako once again found herself fixated on him, fascinated. As he worked, his face grew more animated, more defined, and it was like she was looking at a completely different person. When he was finished, Ochako gingerly moved her wrist. Wow, it almost doesn't hurt at all. Thank you. It's no problem. It was also probably unnecessary, someone like Recovery Girl will probably heal it in a matter of seconds, the boy mumbled. Does anything else hurt? Ochako smiled with a false brightness. I'm fine. She expected that to be the end of things, but it wasn't. Midoriya ped his head to the side, looking at her intently. But you're not. That made her reel in shock. Most of the time when Ochako's world was falling apart and she insisted everything was fine, everyone believed her, including her parents. She was always fine, that was how she dealt with life. I know it seems easier to pretend everything is okay and just deal with it alone, but it's not. That's actually something I just learned recently. You just went through something traumatic, you can admit that you're not okay. I don't think any less of you, he said, that kind smile laced with untold emotion. Against her will, Ochako's eyes filled with tears. Before her mind could stop her, she threw herself at the boy, needing to be near someone that was alive. They wanted to kill us, she sobbed, wiping her tears with the orange blanket. It was only slightly scratchy against her skin. There were so many of them and they were all ready to kill us. You're safe now, the boy murmured. They're gone now and your whole class is safe. The two stayed like that for a while longer, Ochako sobbing to a total stranger. Finally she pulled away, once again wiping away her tears. He smiled at her, a kind smile that he clearly had no idea of how beautiful it was. Little Midoriya, stop flirting back there, an energetic voice called before a police officer appeared between the trees. She was tall with long dark hair pulled into a ponytail and piercing orange eyes. The boy immediately shoved himself backwards, his face instantly burning bright red. Saito, I wasn't flirting, he stammered. She sprained her wrist. Sato's lips quirked up in amusement. She had observed little Midoriya for a while before she announced her presence. The whole time he had been totally concentrated, probably not even noticing that the person he'd been helping was a girl. He had handled her emotions like a pro, better than some seasoned cops Saito knew. But now that the poor boy was done, had registered that a cute girl was sitting in front of him, and little Midoriya was about to mentally shut down. Taking pity on him, Saito said, Go on, little Midoriya. I need to get her statement so you can go and… No! The girl nearly shouted, grabbing the boy's arm unconsciously. I mean, can he stay? He's comforting. Izuku obediently sat down next to the girl, face still warm. He studiously didn't look at her. He didn't think he could meet her eyes ever again, especially not after Sato's comment. Remember, this is all confidential, Midoriya, Saito said seriously. Okay, let's start with you telling me your name, and then you can tell me what happened today. My name is Uraraka Ochako, she said, swallowing thickly. It was a surprise. We came to the USJ for rescue training with Mr. Aizawa, 13, and All Might. Saito noticed how Midoriya winced at the mention of the number 1 hero, and filed the information away for further investigation in the future. Before the teachers could tell us what to do, there was this weird black mist, and then villains came out of nowhere. There were so many of them. All Might and Mr. Aizawa held off most of them while 13 tried to get us out, but the Warp Gate villain got us and sent us to all different parts of the USJ. I got sent to the earthquake simulation, and there were so many villains. I was there with Tokoyami and Ojiro. Together we stared alive until All Might took care of the big black thing and we were all saved. The hand guy and the mist guy got away though, she said with a frown. I wasn't very close to the action, so I don't have anything very helpful to say. Everything is helpful, Officer Saito said with a kind smile. I think I'll go find this Ojiro and Tokoyami so I can have all of your statements together. Come along and assess their injuries, little Midoriya. If they're who I think they are, then they haven't been seen to yet. When he checked her over one more time, Ochako assured the boy that she was mostly fine now, and she was. But for whatever reason when he left, she found her eyes following the boy instinctively feeling the slightest bit bereft. Something about the boy fascinated her, and she didn't even know his name. He chattered about Ojiro to the police officer. Apparently the strange EMT knew one of her classmates. Ochako herself didn't know Ojiro very well. He was one of the more quiet members of the class. He was kind and respectful but quiet. Sure enough, the strange boy spoke with Ojiro comfortably as he disinfected a few scrapes, even drawing a laugh out of the other boy. Ochako hadn't known Ojiro very long, but she didn't think she'd ever seen him laugh. What had the police officer called him? Little Midori? It fit with eyes and hair, but Ochako doubted it would be helpful in finding the boy again. After seeing to Ojiro and Tokoyami, from what she could gather, the boy left to report back to Mr. Aizawa. Ochako would never have been able to pick him out if she hadn't been following Midori's destination. He was only briefly slowed when All Might laughed, flinching at the sudden sound. He ducked out of sight, to Ochako's sadness. Do you want me to take a look at that arm, dear? Recovery Girl asked, startling Ochako out of her observations. The girl unconsciously clutched the wrist to her chest, taking comfort in the bandage wrapped around it. The EMT cleared me. If it bothers me tomorrow, I'll come see you. Right now I'm sure that others need you more. Recovery Girl nodded, glancing at the bandage wrapped around her wrist. He's a capable one, it seems, efficient too. I'm of half a mind to give him some medical field training. A highly unusual boy. Ojiro smiled at his friend. Thanks, Midoriya. You're a lifesaver. Just remember what Sensei said about using your tail like that, Izuku said firmly. It's flexible, but you have to be careful not to overextend it. I know, the blonde groaned. I just got caught up in the moment. Do you have any injuries? Izuku asked the bird-headed boy. Not affects my immortal soul, he intoned. A bird-like shadow burst from the boy. He's too embarrassed to tell you that he tripped on some rubble and scraped his hands and knees really badly. Dark shadow, the boy hissed in betrayal, but Izuku was already pulling out bandages and disinfectant. Don't worry, I promise I've done things 100 times more embarrassing. Just ask Ojiro. It's true. Tokoyami allowed Izuku to begin treating his scrapes, glancing between Ojiro and Izuku. You said your name is Midoriya? Yep. You're quite the interesting character. It's rare to find certified medical personnel at such a young age. Yet on top of that, you seem to have already fostered a relationship with the police officers present. I feel that you have quite the tale to tell, Midoriya. Oh, it's nothing too interesting, nothing compared to your quirk, Izuku said, watching Dark Shadow with bright eyes. I've never seen anything like it. The little Midoriya, one of the officers interrupted, looking incredibly weary. "The detective wants to see you once you're finished here." He nodded at the officer, an older gentleman with a twinkle in his eye despite how tired he seemed. "I'll go find him, thanks Officer Soma." Placing the last bandage on Tokoyami's knee, the boy smiled ruefully. "I need to remember I'm here for a job. It was a pleasure meeting you, Tokoyami. If we ever meet when I'm not on duty, I would love to ask you about your quirk. Ojiro, see you tomorrow." "Bye." Ojiro and Tokoyami watched silently as Midoriya left to seek out the detective, pausing only to hunt down a blanket so Hagakure had something to wear other than her gloves and shoes. He was making a beeline for the detective when he spotted Todoroki attempting to dress his own wounds. "What an interesting specimen of light," the bird-headed boy said, red eyes fixed on the green-haired one. "Yeah, you could say that," Ojiro said, his lips upturned as he watched his friend. "What do you think you're doing?" Izuku nearly screeched at Todoroki. "I'm applying bandages," the boy said with no emotion whatsoever. "By yourself? You just went through a traumatic experience and you're surrounded by trained medical personnel," Izuku lectured, taking the bandages out of the boy's hand. He carefully unraveled what had already been wrapped. Wrapping something like this properly is almost impossible to do on your own. "I'll be fine either way. I'm going to see Recovery Girl any minute now." "You can't always rely on healing quirks. Recovery Girl won't always be there, you need to," Izuku trailed off, examining the boy's arms. "You're covered in burns and bruises, but there's no way these happen today unless you have some sort of self-healing quirk." "I never said I got wounded today." The smaller boy looked into the different colored eyes, a deep sadness shining in his green ones. He unconsciously patted Todoroki's arm as some sort of gesture of comfort before hardening his mouth in a line. "These are never going to heal properly if you keep wrapping them like this. I'll show you how to do it on yourself, but if you can't do it right, you have to find someone to help you." Then Izuku was running, finally making it to the detective. He wove around students that were calming down for the most part. Luckily Detective Tsukachi was out of sight of both All Might and Kaken. Izuku didn't want to keep his presence a secret necessarily, but it was a big day for him. He had just gotten his EMT certification and he was putting it to use for the first time. He didn't want today to be spoiled by either of them. Detective Tsukachi was talking to a man with long, wild black hair, apparently almost finished with taking his statement. Izuku found himself staring at the man. He seemed familiar. He was also favoring one of his arms heavily. The man stopped telling his story, pausing when he noticed Izuku. "Who's the kid?" "I'm Midoriya Izuku," he said before Tsukachi could respond for him. Then he caught the barest glimpse of something nestled underneath the man's scarves. "I'm a certified EMT, and you're Eraserhead, aren't you? I hadn't heard you were teaching at UA. I'm a huge fan. If I weren't on duty I would have probably fainted at this point." "Midoriya is trustworthy, Aizawa," Tsukachi promised. "He's the kid who found the Tanaka girl. If you insist he's trustworthy, I'll believe you. But that's the extent of my story," the tired teacher said. "If you'll excuse me." "Wait," Izuku said. "You need someone to see to your arm. I understand if you don't want me to, but it needs attention." Eraserhead stared Izuku down. "My arm? Yeah, it looks like some sort of disintegration quirk. You look dead on your feet, so Recovery Girl can't heal it all right now, but if you don't have something to compress the damaged portion, your nerves may never fully recover." Hiro blinked at the deluge of information before offering his arm. "Go for it, kid." Izuku procured a small roll of gauze, nimble fingers wrapping the man's wounded elbow with just the right amount of tension. While the teen worked, Eraserhead was contemplative. "How did you know it was a disintegration quirk?" "What?" "Oh, the damage pattern of your sleeve. Fabric doesn't just do that. I couldn't see your elbow because of the shadow your sleeve cast, but you gestured awkwardly, so..." He trailed off, physically forcing himself not to mutter in front of Eraserhead. "All finished, but see Recovery Girl after getting some rest." Eraserhead was staring at him intently. "Have you ever thought about becoming a hero?" The boy smiled bittersweetly. "It was all I dreamed about when I was younger. But I am quirkless, and I was told by a certain pro that it was impossible." His smile quivered, the hurt obviously still fresh. I'm aiming to become a detective instead. I've found that they help people even more than heroes sometimes, and they don't deal with all of the attention, which is really appealing. Aizawa looked Izuku up and down, mentally evaluating him. Kid, you could have done it. If you ever change your mind, let me know. You've got a good head on your shoulders and dedication. Izuku sniffed, swiping at some stray tears. That means a lot, Eraserhead. But for now I'm more than happy with the path I'm on. Maybe we'll even work together in the future. Also, one of your students, the short boy with purple hair? I noticed he was stuck to Officer Sasaki. If you want your student alive, you'll want to take care of the situation. Tsukachi paled. Sasaki has a reputation for breaking limbs for unwanted advances. Eraserhead sighed, a deep, bone-weary sigh. I'll be back. Wide green eyes turned to Tsukachi. What did you need, detective? You know you can just call me Tsukachi Midoriya, he said, pausing briefly. You still want to be a detective, don't you? Izuku was practically bouncing. Absolutely. I've got an opportunity for you, the detective said carefully. We're beginning a new program, a provisional police officer system. It's a bit like the provisional hero licenses. You would go through the police academy and afterward you would have the same authority as a rookie police officer. Really? I hadn't heard of this. It was just barely approved, Tsukachi said, suddenly nervous for some reason. And if you're willing, we'd like you to be our first provisional police officer. The boy's mouth fell open and stayed that way until more voices broke into the conversation. You already told him? Dang it, Tsukachi, we agreed you would wait until we were all here. No, you agreed to that, Saito. You knew there was a good chance that Midoriya would leave before we gathered everyone together. I think you broke our boy, detective. Izuku finally closed his mouth, looking around at all of the police officers surrounding him. Tears were already streaming down his face. I can really be one of you? Saito ruffled his hair. You were already one of us, little Midoriya. We were all panicking a bit. We didn't know when we would be able to see you once your EMT class finished. Just to be clear, they worried. I wanted you gone, Mori said sourly. That's true. I apologize for briefly forgetting that you're the worst, Mori, Saito said with a smile. But you still have one more statement to get, right? You were in charge of getting it from that kid with the electric quirk. What? He's mentally gone, there's no way. You two should get along famously then. Saito said, bodily shoving the man away. Izuku, still crying, smiled at the officers surrounding him. Thank you. Thank you all. Sasaki coalesced on the group, muttering, Stupid grape kid, next time I'll... Wait, little Midoriya is crying? You told him without me? I thought we were going to wait. What Inko had feared would be a lonely, isolated life for her son turned out to be more full than she could have ever imagined. Izuku seemed to make friends daily, coming home with excited exhaustion and stories upon stories to tell. Unsurprisingly, Izuku currently sat at the top of his class in the police academy. He was still working through high school at an absurd pace, actually ahead of schedule, leaving him more time to work on his college classes. He still always made time for martial arts. The dojo was essentially another family to Izuku, just like the police station. Inko couldn't be more glad that they had chosen this rather unconventional lifestyle. Her baby was happy again, and he was surrounded by people who saw more than his quirklessness. And more were coming every day. It seemed that Izuku was always asking permission to help someone with something, or someone wanted to give him additional training of some sort. She'd already gotten phone calls from Recovery Girl and Eraserhead separately asking her permission for training. It seemed Recovery Girl had her heart set on training Izuku to be a field medic, while Eraserhead had only met Izuku briefly but had been vastly impressed. He wanted to supplement Izuku's martial arts training, apparently horrified at the thought of his potential being wasted. She was grateful to the two beyond words, especially as they had each promised to train Izuku's self-sacrificing streak out of him, whatever Tsukachi didn't manage to. She hadn't told him about the offers yet. She wanted it to be a surprise for her boy. He deserved all of the happiness life could afford him. Everyone wanted a hand in helping Izuku, and it blindsided the little Midoriya family. Mom, Izuku called from another room. It sounded like he was on the phone. Gunhead wonders if I can help him train the hero students with him on Monday. Aren't you leaving for Hosu on Monday? This would be Monday morning. I could catch the train to Hosu right afterwards, Izuku explained. Oh, and Detective Tsukachi wanted me to ask you if it would be okay if I spend some of my spare time with the Hosu police. Apparently that's where the police chief that approved the provisional program is based. Is it okay with Dr. Meiji? He said as long as he gets me in the mornings that's fine. He teaches in the afternoon, so that's when I would be with the police. Inko considered it for a moment. It's fine with me as long as you promise not to burn yourself out. I promise. Make sure to go to bed early tonight. Inko warned. Your week is going to be extra busy. Of course. He mumbled something into the phone, probably telling Gunhead that he could help out, then he hung up. I'm going for a run now, Mom. Running was becoming one of Izuku's favorite pastimes. It was one of the few things that could clear his head and help him begin to make sense of the madness that was his life. He hadn't been running for long when he realized he wasn't alone. A few blocks down was a familiar-looking boy huffing and puffing much the same way he had when he first started running. Despite the sweat running down the boy's face, however, his purple hair still managed to stand almost straight up. Izuku slowed, trying to place the boy, then it clicked. You're one of the finalists from the UA Sports Festival. Your matches were fascinating. The boy stopped, breathing heavily. However, he still managed to look supremely unimpressed. Nice joke. No, it's not a joke. Izuku said frantically. I know some people might find your quirk unsettling, but the police station and I think it's perfect for heroism. It's discreet, swift, and it will prevent so much damage. The boy raised an eyebrow. The police station? Oh, I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I'm currently training to get a provisional police badge. I spend a lot of time at the police station because of that, so I know the police officers pretty well, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. Catching his breath, the boy regarded Izuku critically. You're strange. I get that a lot. I'm curious, did you have a plan of what to do if someone had figured out your quirk? Not really. But one of the teachers reached out to me and offered to train me in hand-to-hand combat. Awesome. If you ever want to spar, I go to Valiant's dojo a few blocks that way. I've already learned a lot from him. The boy considered for a moment before breaking back into a light jog. Izuku took this as an invitation to join the boy and began to jog beside him. He couldn't tell if he was being annoying or not until the boy stopped. This is my house, he said abruptly enough that Izuku could feel the dismissal. The boy was emotionless as he turned away, but at the door of his house, he paused. You can call me Shinso, he said before disappearing through the door. A grin spread across Izuku's face, and there was a spring in his step during the rest of his run. Apparently this was evident when he walked into the police station. Tamakawa was at the front desk that day, and the serious officer inclined his head to Izuku. You're looking more excited than usual, Midoriya. I just met one of the finalists from the UA Sports Festival, he said excitedly. His name is Shinso and he seems really nice. You might want to wait to get to know him before you show him your analysis of his quirk, the cat-headed officer counseled. In fact, that's a good rule of thumb for most people. Izuku rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I guess I do get ahead of myself sometimes. Don't worry, little Midoriya, we find it endearing, Officer Saito said, materializing to ruffle his hair. And amazing. Your analysis of my quirk was fascinating to read. I can see why that college professor of yours wants to steal you away from us. Nakamura smiled. You're going to be fascinated when Detective Kimura comes back from maternity leave. Her quirk is fascinating. Saito chuckled darkly. I've got my welcome back for Kimura all planned. She'll never see it coming. She just had a baby, you're not doing anything to Kimura, Nakamura told his partner sternly. Besides, if you start another prank war in the station, I'm requesting to be transferred. But you saw what she did to me before she left. Saito protested indignantly. My desk hasn't been the same since. There's another detective at the station? Izuku asked. Oh, no one has told you about Kimura? She's the best homicide detective in the city, Possibly in all of Japan, Saito said. Combined with Detective Tsukachi, our precinct is the best in Mizudafu. We were all stationed here because it's one of the safest places in the city. That way it's not so bad when Kimura and Tsukachi get called to outside cases. The longer Saito spoke, the brighter grew the stars in Izuku's eyes. Really? That's amazing. Hey, don't underestimate us, little Midoriya, Officer Soma warned as he passed, gray eyes playful. The detectives handpicked the officers except Mori. The police chief forced him on us to straighten him out. Mori glared at his partner, pouting. I was top of my class in the police academy, old man. So were the rest of us, Nakamura warned. And we didn't have such poor scores on cooperation, Saito taunted. We have jobs to do, Mori huffed. We shouldn't be wasting time on some quirkless kid, he's probably not going to make it through the program anyway. Izuku froze along with everyone else, no longer used to his quirklessness being held against him. The other officers reacted more violently, though it was all halted by a sudden burst of cold wind whipping through the room. Officer Soma was using his quirk, Icy Gale, to get everyone's attention. Mori, you're off duty today. Instead you'll be the meter maid. Mori squawked in indignation. I'm above jobs like. No, you aren't, Soma interrupted, his voice as cold as his quirk. You are a servant of the public, and that means you respect them. Midoriya didn't choose to be quirkless, but he's accomplished amazing things. You were born with some advantages, and all you've accomplished today is unsuccessfully bullying a teenager. Think about that while you write tickets. All present officers glared at Mori as he slunk away, some shame on his face. Saito, as usual, was the first to speak. Don't listen to anything he says, little Midoriya. You're going to be the best of us all. A small smile worked its way onto Izuku's face. You know, I'm actually okay. It didn't really bother me. And it was true. Izuku knew his mom had informed a few of the officers about why they had moved, at least as much information as she had. He had no doubt that if any of them knew the full scope of Kaken's bullying, a headhunt would ensue. It was heartwarming. In fact, Izuku's eyes were watering. Now he was officially crying. Chaos erupted in the station. It's okay, little Midoriya. Don't cry. I'll go punch Mori out for you. Will that make you feel better? Wait, are these happy tears? What's going on, little Midoriya? I'm fine, I promise, Izuku sniffed, swiping at his tears. Thank you all for helping and caring. I've never had that before. Silence fell over the officers as the full implications of his statement sank in. Tsukachi's office door swung open. What is going on out here? Why is Midoriya crying? The detective demanded. He claims these are happy tears, but the chaos was because Mori was being his usual charming self. The detective scowled. If he was insulting Midoriya, give him meter-maid duties for the week. No cases. Soma, Tamakawa will be your partner for now instead. Understood. Finally exhaling, Tsukachi relaxed, smiling at Midoriya. Come on, kid. Tsuramigi wanted me to give you a more detailed idea of what to expect in Hosu. So I heard whispers about a provisional police officer, Gunhead said as casually as one could in the middle of an intensive sparring session. Izuku huffed a laugh, barely audible over his panting. You're not going to distract me. Lightning quick, he blocked the killer strike that would have felled most men. But I'm not an officer yet, I'm just going through the police academy. Taking a step back, the two fighters circled one another, something predatory in their stances. I noticed Ojiro wasn't on your list of interns. In the blink of an eye, Izuku lunged for Gunhead, hoping to throw the man off guard. He should have known it would never work. The pro-hero saw it coming a mile away, catching Izuku's arm and using it to fling him onto the mat, his back making an impressively loud slapping noise. A squeak sounded from the doorway, making both fighters look. A group of kids that Izuku recognized as some of Gunhead's dojo students stood with a few hero students. It was hard to tell since Izuku was looking at them upside down. He narrowed his eyes. The girl in front looked familiar. It was the girl Saito and Sasaki had teasingly been calling his girlfriend since the USJ incident. He had made the mistake of watching the sports festival with the police station, And whenever she did anything, the two extolled the virtues of strong women to a degree that made Izuku want to die. Surprisingly, in those moments the most bearable officer was Mori, as he just shushed everyone else. Izuku wondered whether or not he would be able to convince Gunhead to keep quiet about all of this. If Izuku didn't interfere, Gunhead would tell Valiant, who would tell Officer Soma, as the two had a history of working together in the prime of their careers. Soma would gush about it to the rest of the officers, which would be an absolute nightmare. Sasaki and Saito were already practically engraving wedding invitations for Izuku and the girl, based on their short interaction after the USJ incident. Once Detective Tsukachi heard, he would take it upon himself to have an awkward conversation with Izuku about girls and the proper way to approach such situations, which Izuku was definitely not ready for. When Tsukachi had learned about Izuku's total lack of paternal direction, he had taken it upon himself to give him the lessons that men needed most. Then somehow in the midst of it all his mom would find out, which would lead to a lot of tears and an even more awkward conversation. Gunhead had to be stopped at all costs. Not that Izuku didn't like her based off of their short interaction, she was actually a really cute girl. Was it offensive to call an aspiring hero cute? The point was that the girl had likely been in shock when they had met, and he had been nervous over his first EMT call, and Midoriya, Gunhead interrupted in a murmur, low enough that only Izuku could hear, holding out a hand to help the boy up. Are you okay? You're muttering, you haven't done that in a while. As he clambered to his feet, all of his blood rushed to Izuku's face, which was turning a bright red color that tomatoes would be jealous of. Oh my gosh, you didn't actually hear what I said, did you? Did they? Oh no, you can't tell anyone at the station about this. Please, Gunhead. After a moment, the pro-hero realized just what was going on, somehow blushing through his mask. Is it the hero in turn? Do you think she's pretty? Izuku squeaked, burying his face in his hands while the students filed in, taking their places. Ochako hadn't caught any of what was being said, but it took everything in her not to react to how Gunhead and the boy he'd been sparring with were standing. Their poses were just too cute. The boy looked familiar for some reason, though it was hard to pinpoint where Ochako might have known him from when his face was so red. Gunhead stopped whispering to the boy, straightening up. As you all know, you're here to become better fighters, to be more prepared to help people in any situation. Those of you that are training to become heroes, pay attention. Too many heroes are overly dependent on their quirks, but as pros we should have other means of resolving situations at our disposal. Some quirks, like my own, are too risky to use in many situations. So learn well, it will literally save lives. A weighty silence fell over the room, each participant contemplating the gravity of the situation. Gunhead continued, but we can still enjoy our time together. In fact, I expect it. Today we have a special guest to help you learn. This is Midoriya Izuku. Ochako's head snapped up at the name Midoriya. That's where she knew him from. He was the EMT who helped her after the USJ. But why was he here? Was Gunhead expecting them to get hurt that badly? All eyes were on the two at the front until Gunhead nudged Izuku. You're supposed to introduce yourself. Oh, he stammered. Like Gunhead said, I'm Midoriya Izuku. I've been practicing martial arts for just about a year now, so I'm by no means an expert, but I look forward to helping each of you. Midoriya's nervous habits were confusing to Ochako. He had been so confident after the USJ, but now he could barely form a full sentence. Regardless, Ochako felt strangely compelled to get to know him better. We only have Midoriya for today, unfortunately, so he is going to help me demonstrate the most important things you need to know, Gunhead said. Remember to only use Gunhead martial arts, Midoriya. We don't want to confuse them with all of your fancy techniques. Got it? You can be the attacker first, Izuku offered. Are you sure? Izuku stretched. I need to work on my defense against knives. Let's do it. Ochako tensed as Gunhead produced a knife that certainly looked real and rushed Midoriya. However, in a blur of green motion, Midoriya held the knife in one hand, and with the other he held Gunhead at arm's length. One of the boys blinked. Wait, what just happened? This is what we're going to show you, Gunhead said. Midoriya is going to come at me a lot more slowly than I came at him, and will go through every movement. They continued like that for some time, demonstrating the most vital moves. When he thought it was sufficient, Gunhead said, "Okay, pair up and let's practice." Immediately all of the attention in the room snapped to Midoriya with the same desperation of people who wanted, nay, needed, the smart kid in their group for a school project. However, for whatever reason, Gunhead pushed the boy forward. "You're going to work with you, Raraka." Izuku flushed, nodding. He shuffled over to the girl, not daring to meet her eyes. "That didn't stop Ochako. You're that boy that helped me after the USJ. I thought you were an EMT, what are you doing here?" "The whole EMT thing is just a hobby, kind of like martial arts," Izuku said, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. Internally, though, he was celebrating. He was successfully talking to a girl. Awkwardly, he offered her the knife. "You try attacking first so you can get a feel for the motions." As the two practiced the motions again and again, Ochako couldn't help but wonder about this boy. Before he took the knife from her, she was awed at his easy, fluid movements. After, she was fascinated and thankful by his control. Every movement was deliberate, and his eyes held mass amounts of intelligence. It was when they were taking a quick breather that Ochako finally worked up the courage to ask him the question that had been haunting her. "But what do you want to do if being an EMT is just a hobby?" "Well, I originally wanted to be a hero," he said, slowly hunching in on himself. "I wanted to be one for as long as I can remember. But that's just not possible for me." "What? You're really talented, Midoriya? Why would you think you couldn't be a hero?" Ochako asked. "I'm Quirkless," he said, smiling bitterly. "I had plans, ways to become a hero without one, but a certain pro told me it just wasn't possible. But I wanted to be a hero to help people, to save them. Heroism isn't the only way to do that, so I'm learning all of the things I can that might help someone one day. My goal now is actually to be a detective." Ochako couldn't help but smile at how bright the boy in front of her was. She was sad to hear his story, true, but she could already tell he was going to be a great detective. However, she felt conflicted. Before today, if someone had asked if a quirkless person could be a hero, Ochako would have probably said no. But something told her Midoriya could have done it. After all, she had classmates that probably wouldn't stand a chance against him sparring. After all, quirks weren't everything. Throughout this conversation, neither teenager noticed that Gunhead was listening in, taking note of every word. He wanted nothing more than to find whatever hero had hurt Midoriya so deeply and shake them. He had no doubt that Valiant would feel the same way. Izuku and Ochako continued practicing, casually talking throughout. "I never got the chance to ask you, what's your quirk?" "It's called zero gravity," she said. "I'm sure you can guess what it does." Ochako liked her quirk, but it was nowhere near as impressive as Bakugo's or Todoroki's. But Midoriya had stars in his eyes. He opened his mouth, 1,000 questions dancing on his lips when he saw a clock. "Oh no, I'm going to be late. I have to catch a train, but I would love to hear about your quirk. I have so many questions." Suddenly Gunhead was there. "Why don't you give her your number?" The boy startled at the sudden presence of the hero, emitting a little squeak. "Gunhead, what are you?" "You're going to be late, Midoriya. Just give her your number," the hero said, pressing pen and paper into his hand. Nodding, Izuku hurriedly scribbled his number and pressed it into Uraraka's hands before yelling his goodbyes and sprinting out the door. As he ran, it fully registered what he'd just done. He'd just given away his number. A cute girl had his number. He thought about that almost the whole train ride to Hosu, but once he was there he had to really concentrate. Izuku found himself on the college campus with little recollection of how he had gotten there, excitement building every second he stood there. Maybe he was being overly dramatic, but Izuku couldn't help but feel that this was the true beginning of a new portion of his life. Even more than starting the police academy, Izuku felt like this was what would get him where he wanted to be. He had always pictured going to UA as the next step to his future, but somehow this felt right. He couldn't wait to meet Dr. Meiji in person and really start his college career in earnest. Izuku stepped forward eagerly, clutching his backpack and duffel bag, once more incredibly grateful for how lucky he'd been thus far in life. But it seemed that the boy's life could never be easy, nor simple. He had no idea what the rest of the week held in store for him. Debatably, the worst misfortune of all was that Izuku had forgotten to talk to Gunhead about not sharing sensitive information. Oops. Stepping onto campus was practically a religious experience. Izuku clutched his tattered yellow backpack tightly as he adjusted his new, equally yellow fanny pack, anxiety plaguing him. Part of him whispered that it was some sort of elaborate prank, and his scholarship was going to be yanked out of his hands. But he couldn't think that way, he had to live in the moment. At least, that was what Sasaki kept insisting. He slowly found his way towards what he hoped was the correct building. Today, alone, he was supposed to sit in on one of Meiji's classes, to see the classroom firsthand. Izuku picked what he hoped was the correct hallway, scanning room numbers. There was the right classroom. Luckily, he had only made it a few minutes late. He was going to sneak in and do his best to avoid attention, but that plan was aborted when he stumbled upon entering the room. He managed to catch himself, but the noise he made turned all eyes on him. He swallowed thickly, internally hoping for the sweet release of death. Is this foundational quirk studies? The professor, a composed older gentleman, turned around. Midoriya, you made it. Class, I want to introduce you to the author of Analysis 18. All students immediately snapped their attention to him. There's no way, said a girl with magenta hair. He's like 12. I'm 15, Izuku mumbled, sitting down in one of the only seats left. Naturally, it was right in the front. Midoriya is undeniably the author of Analysis 18, Dr. Meiji said. He's here today as a guest, so be respectful. Someone in the back snorted. He's probably got some analysis quirk. Izuku bit his lip, unsure whether or not to speak up. He settled on simply listening, taking notes on everything Dr. Meiji was saying. He could feel the other students staring at him, he just hoped it wouldn't get as violent as middle school had been. As it was, Izuku desperately wanted to participate in the class, but old habits die hard. Besides, he didn't even want to think about what kind of retaliation college students would be capable of. Izuku managed to stay silent until Dr. Meiji asked him point blank, Midoriya, based on this picture, what would you say these two people's quirks are? He studied the picture, a scene from a high school hallway. It featured two students, a boy with barely visible fangs and slitted pupils and a girl with downcast eyes. The boy has a minor snake quirk. I would guess he produces a weak venom, but nothing that has changed his physiology too much. Class. The student with magenta hair from earlier scoffed. It could also be something like a cat quirk. Yes, it could be if it weren't the faint scale pattern peeking out from his shirt collar, Izuku pointed out. And what of the girl? Meiji asked. It could be some kind of emitter type, one student hesitantly ventured. Or some mental quirk? Meiji listened to several more suggestions before asking, what do you think, Midoriya? She's quirkless, he said simply. What? That's not very likely. Dr. Meiji quieted them down before saying, now tell us why you think this, Midoriya. Well, there's no evidence of a quirk, but most of all it's about her body language. The way she's junched in on herself, and it looks like she's nervously moving her fingers. It all screams quirkless. She could have a quirk people bully her for, though. Or she could just be anxious, someone said. Izuku shrugged. There's an unspoken connection between quirkless people. We just recognize each other on sight. I can't explain it. The class stared at him in stunned silence until Meiji clapped his hands. Unfortunately, class is over now. Remember, your third analysis is due on Wednesday. Now get out of here. Izuku began gathering up his things when he noticed the magenta-haired student quietly approached his desk. It's Midoriya, right? He looked up sharply before cautiously nodding. I'm Yutani. I just wanted to apologize for earlier. I assumed you had an analysis quirk. That doesn't make it right, and I'm sorry. I'm just a little jaded about people deciding how to live their lives based on their quirks. People do tend to judge people's capabilities and intelligence on their quirks, Izuku acknowledged. It's something that really needs to be addressed. Yutani nodded furiously. I actually want to compile biographies of people who live life unconventionally in terms of their quirks. I'd love to read it someday. She smiled wickedly. Maybe I'll have to write a sequel about quirkless people and feature you. Oh, my story isn't really interesting, Izuku mumbled. Somehow I doubt that. The author of Analysis 18 clearly has something to say, Yutani said, eyes gleaming. What is Analysis 18? He asked, a little exasperated. Everyone keeps referencing it. It's an analysis of present mic that Dr. Meiji read to the class to show us that our analyses are lacking, Yutani explained. He kind of held it over our heads, telling us that the author had the same amount of formal training as we did. You did what? Izuku yelped, looking at the professor with utter betrayal. I wrote that when I was 13, it's basically 5 pages of me being a fanboy. It's brilliant, Dr. Meiji argued. Truly, a work of art. Izuku groaned before standing to join the professor, waving Yutani goodbye. When he turned to continue his complaint, he found Meiji staring at him with a brow raised. You didn't strike me as a fanny pack type man, Midoriya. In truth, Izuku liked the fanny pack. It was a bright yellow that almost matched his backpack. He was just a little embarrassed about the context of the fanny pack. When he had last been at the station, Tsukachi did give him more information about what to expect in Hosu. However, he wouldn't let Izuku leave. Instead, he called Officer Kondo in, who walked in, fanny pack in hand. Kondo sat directly opposite Izuku, placing the thing on the desk between them. As you are going to a larger, unfamiliar city and you get into more trouble than should be statistically possible, the station all pitched in to get you this. Saito and Sasaki have dubbed it the Don't RPE Me kit. It currently consists of a whistle, pepper spray, a knife with a sheath that can be worn in multiple discrete places, and a flashlight taser. All of these items are legal to use in self-defense when the need arises. Izuku had choked, cheeks burning with embarrassment. It's called what? The Don't RPE Me kit. Officer Nakamura proposed we call it the Save My Fanny Pack, but Sasaki and Saito vetoed it. The rest of us didn't care what we called it, as long as it keeps you alive. He had stared at Kondo for a long while, silently willing her to claim it was all a joke, but no such claim came. It was very real, and apparently he was not allowed to go to Hosu without it. Izuku had half wondered if they put a tracking device in it because the officers kept ominously insisting they would know if he didn't have it with him. But they were probably just joking. That would be ridiculous. Snapping back to the present, Izuku stammered, "It was a gift." The professor looked a little more closely at Izuku's shirt. It was his favorite t-shirt. Actually, the more that I think on it, the fanny pack seems to me exactly something you would wear. Thanks. They wound through campus to a set of dorms. Meiji handed Izuku a key card. If you go through these doors, your room is the first on the left. You're welcome to stay here anytime, but especially when you come to visit me. Izuku bit his lip. I didn't know I needed to bring things to furnish the room. Would he even have a blanket to use tonight? Oh, don't worry about that, go see, the professor urged. When Izuku swiped the key card, the door opened easily. It was easily recognizable as a college dorm room, but softer, toned down. It was inviting, the bed covered in a fluffy blue comforter and overstuffed pillows. A desk was already stocked with notebooks, paper, and writing utensils. A mini fridge hummed in the corner, and a shiny TV hung on the wall. Izuku flushed. This is too much. You really didn't have to do this, just a bed would have been fine. Midoriya, Dr. Meiji said, you're one of the most brilliant students I've ever taught, but you're also 15 years old. I want to put your mind at ease, but I also want to assure your mother that you are being taken care of. Settle and relax. Call your mother. I have another class to teach, but tonight I'll treat you to dinner outside of campus as this is the only night I can. I admire your dedication to become a police officer, but I can't help but resent that Tsuragami gets to steal you away. Izuku nodded faintly, a little overwhelmed. He faintly remembered Dr. Meiji mentioning that he did occasionally work with the police. He idly wondered if the professor knew Detective Tsukachi. It seemed like Tsukachi could be called across the country for a difficult case at a moment's notice. He felt like Meiji might have mentioned something about it, but it was hard to remember when his interactions with the man had only been over email and the occasional video chat to discuss a particular analysis. His phone buzzed with a text. It was from Saito. He was always at least the tiniest bit hesitant to open her texts. She was just so unpredictable. Don't let Chief Dogface talk you into moving to Hosu. You belong with our station. Attached was a picture of whoever happened to be on duty at the moment. Saito had an arm slung around Nakamura's shoulders, Tamakawa and Soma idly waving, and Mori was in the background, looking miserable in the meter-made vest. Izuku smiled. He was nervous to meet Chief Tsuragami tomorrow, but if he was half as welcoming as Izuku's station, Izuku would be in good hands. Izuku soon found that his conversations with Dr. Meiji fell into the same pattern most of the time. It was nice communicating with him in person rather than solely over email. But no matter the topic, the two would talk so animatedly and extensively that their analysis was so complex and involved that they barely understood it, let alone anyone else. During one of their sessions, a grad student had walked into Meiji's office with a question. He had only listened for a few seconds, eyes wide until he scuttled away, claiming that he would be back later. Dr. Meiji noticed this as well. He was deep in thought one morning when he said, "Midoriya, I have a new challenge for you. I want you to start doing a brief analysis on the people close to you. Your strength lies in the way that you can discern so much about a person from idle observation, but that's not always practical. If you're helping a hero or the police force, they won't always have time to read a 20-page analysis. Your challenge is to make these no longer than a single page, but with all of the most important information." Izuku thought it over a minute before nodding. "That makes sense." The professor smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "I have a class soon, and you've got patrol this evening with the police, don't you? You don't want to be late." They parted ways, and Izuku only paused at his room long enough to grab his EMT pack before running out to the waiting police car. It wasn't really necessary for patrol, but Izuku liked to carry it. It gave him peace of mind knowing that he was better prepared to help someone should the need arise. Between the EMT pack and the Don't RPE Me kit, Izuku felt prepared for whatever may come. He had no idea how wrong he was. The officers waiting for him were ones he'd met before. Mao was in his mid-20s with a quirk that made his teeth razor-sharp, and his partner Ashia was cool-headed with a stamina enhancement quirk. Ashia reminded Izuku a little bit of Kondo, but his glare didn't have nearly the same impact as hers did. The two greeted Izuku as he climbed into the car, genuinely happy to see him. Ashia said, "You get to pick where we're patrolling tonight. We're extraneous, so we can patrol anywhere within our zone." Izuku thought of the news he'd been analyzing that very morning. He was sure the hero killer, Stain, was still in Hosu. The man likely didn't fight well against groups of people, so it would probably be safe enough to go. "Can we patrol this area of town?" Izuku asked, pointing to a specific area on the paper map Mao held. "It's a pretty quiet area, but whatever you want, Midoriya," Mao said. For whatever reason, Izuku felt a deep sense of foreboding, but it also came with the sense that someone needed his help. To distract himself, Izuku instead thought about his EMT pack. It would be too cumbersome to carry when he became a fully fledged police officer, but if he could compress it to, say, a fanny pack. Mao broke him from his ponderings. "We know how much you like heroes, so if you wanted to see him, we could probably catch Native on his patrol. This is his part of town. I would love to meet him. I have some questions about his quirk." Smiling fondly at the boy's excitement, Mao told Ashia to pull over. The three piled out of the car. They had been together for patrols the past few days, and the officers were growing ever fonder of the kid. Both found themselves shaking their heads at Izuku's insistence to bring his EMT pack. Mao raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate how prepared you're trying to be, Midoriya, but it seems just as excessive tonight as it has the other nights." "Well, I can't do much to help with police work until I finish at the academy, so I'll help this way," Izuku said brightly. Making sure his equipment was in place, Ashia said, "I was doubtful when I heard Tsukachi's plan to make a teenager an officer, but now I see his reasoning. We're glad to have you, Midoriya." Izuku stammered an awkward thanks, but all three froze at the sound of a pained groan. Luckily, the police had been marginally successful in training Izuku not to run into potentially dangerous situations. Instead, it was a brisk walk. The kid very nearly managed to leave Mao and Ashia in his dust. "Call for backup," Izuku commanded before disappearing around the corner. "Should we?" Mao asked hesitantly. "Do what the kid says. I'm going to follow. You stay here unless you're needed." If it gets bad, pull Midoriya out. I don't want to explain to Tsukachi how we let his son get murdered. Izuku had immediately made his way to Native as quietly as possible. The whole scene was a mess. Just as he had thought, here was the hero killer Stain, but someone had distracted him from his prey. While Native slowly bled out in the alleyway, Stain was busy injuring someone in silver armor. Izuku was fairly sure he had seen that same armor on one of the Class 1A students after the USJ incident, and the boy's resemblance to Ingenium was undeniable. So this was a revenge mission. But now was not the time to analyze motives and quirks. Izuku had to see to Native's injuries. The hero was conscious, but paralyzed from Stain's quirk. Native hissed for him to leave, get pros, but if his injuries weren't seen to immediately, Native would likely be permanently paralyzed like Ingenium. He needed an ambulance now. Izuku felt slightly guilty doing this, but he stuffed a wad of gauze into the man's mouth to hopefully shut him up. He felt when the hero killer's eyes fell on him. Chills ran down Izuku's spine, and his heart sank when he saw that the hero student was unmoving on the ground. His helmet was off, and Izuku recognized him from the sports festival. Now the resemblance to Ingenium was undeniable. The two were likely brothers. But Stain's eyes were on Izuku, and his sword dripped blood onto the pavement, the same blood that the hero student was loosing too quickly. Hosu police! Put your weapon down, hero killer Stain. Ashia stalked into the alleyway, placing himself between Izuku and Stain, gun drawn. Ah, the public defenders that don't masquerade as heroes. I have no qualms with you, but I won't allow you to keep me from my prey, Stain said in a voice that sounded like the night itself. The hero killer sprang forward, nimbly avoiding the bullet Ashia shot. While the man was partially distracted, Izuku finished bandaging Native as quickly as possible before scuttling over to the hero student, ripping open high EMT pack. What are you doing? Get out of here, this isn't your fight, the boy wheezed. It shouldn't be yours either, Izuku hissed, pressing gauze down onto the wound. He almost immediately felt blood soak through. You're training to be a hero, aren't you? I thought heroes were agents of protection, not revenge. Midoriya, get out of here, came a strangled cry. Ashia was collapsed on the ground, blood slowly staining his shirt. Izuku frantically searched the alleyway. Stain was. He managed to raise his EMT pack in front of him like a shield, a few daggers sinking into it. Stain was advancing, his sword glinting in the moonlight. Once his quirk wears off, press on that gauze, Izuku instructed the hero student before putting the "Don't RP me" whistle between his lips, blowing with the full capacity of his lungs. You test my patience, child. Stain growled, lunging forward. Izuku knew he couldn't even begin to match the man in martial arts. His technique really was a thing of beauty. He also knew that everyone who cared about him was going to hate this plan. But Stain's quirk required him to ingest his victim's blood, which meant that he had to get close to said victim for even a moment, which was when Izuku would strike. The sword sliced through the EMT pack like it was nothing, but Izuku managed to avoid the blade. He was still kneeling near the hero student, and he threw the remnants of the pack at the hero killer. You behave like a true hero, child. But don't hold back, I'm curious to see what manner of quirk you have. Stain chuckled darkly before bringing his sword down in a wicked arc. Izuku cried out as it was buried in his thigh, but now was his time. One hand lashed out, desperately grabbing the blade and pulling, causing the hero killer to stumble closer. Spitting out the whistle, Izuku said, I don't have one, before using his other hand to whip out the taser, pressing it to the soft skin of the hero killer's neck. The sheer power of the thing jolted Izuku a bit, but he held it there probably longer than necessary until it was clear that the man wasn't getting up. In the distance he heard sirens. But that was good. Where had his whistle landed? No matter. Taking a deep breath, Izuku howled, "Ing." The man came running, freezing for only a moment upon seeing all of the blood in the alleyway. He was clearly terrified that someone was dead, which Izuku understood, but he was also acutely aware of every second as it ticked by. Mao, get cuffs on this man now. Use everything you can to restrain him. I don't know when he's going to wake up. Is that the hero killer Stain? The younger officer choked. Get cuffs on him now, Ashia growled from the ground. Right. And backup is coming, but there's some kind of chaos in another part of the city. We don't know how long it will take, Mao said, firmly handcuffing Stain. Midoriya, you still have a sword in your thigh. It's the only thing keeping me from passing out from blood loss, Izuku said calmly. Thank goodness for adrenaline because I can't feel a thing. The hero student slowly sat up, putting pressure on his wound like Izuku had instructed. Stain's quirk had released when the man passed out, but he was the only one fit enough to move. Mao was tending to Ashia's wounds now that Stain had a pair of H&D CFFs around his wrists and another around his ankles. But no one was going to die this night. Izuku was fairly confident in that. You're quirkless? The boy asked, pale from blood loss. Why would you run in like that? I'm morally opposed to letting people die, Izuku said. I'm Midoriya Izuku, by the way. Ida Tenya. I must give my sincerest apologies, Midoriya. You were correct in your estimation of me. I was acting out of revenge. It was you, not I, that showed true heroism tonight. I think that's a bit much, but I appreciate the sentiment. Oh, the ambulances are almost here, perfect. From the ground, Ashia groaned. Mao, you're the one who has to explain this situation to Tsukachi. What? Why me? Mao yelped. You're the only one who didn't get stabbed, Ashia accused. You can tell Tsuragami first if you want, but you're calling Tsukachi. It was only moments later that a whole host of police officers and EMTs appeared. The first officer to get to Izuku looked down and swore. Is that the hero killer Stain? Please take him, Izuku said. Before he could observe or say anything more, a gaggle of medical personnel were transferring him to a stretcher. The inside of the ambulance was sterile, and it felt familiar to him after his training, but his adrenaline was beginning to wear off, and the pain was what he would describe as all-consuming. He was pretty sure he asked someone to call his mom, and then he was at the hospital and people kept saying something about surgery. Then, mercifully, the world drifted away and the pain was gone. But it seemed no sooner than he had comfortably fallen asleep when someone was urging him awake, insistently shoving a spoon in his mouth. You need to wake up and eat, someone was saying, shoving the thick butterscotch pudding into his mouth. Izuku's eyes fluttered open to see he was in a hospital room, his mom standing along with so many people. His head was fuzzy and thinking was just so hard. You just got out of surgery for your leg. How do you feel? The person force-feeding him pudding asked. Izuku attempted to force his mind to cooperate, but it was a struggle. He intended to answer the question, but when he opened his mouth, what came out was, "Do I get to keep the sword?" "It's evidence for now," Tsuragami said with his usual gravity. "But we'll see." "I should tell Stain thank you," Izuku mumbled, eyes unfocused. "He gave me a sword and called me a hero. I always wanted to be a hero." "Why don't you become a hero?" Ida asked from the bed next to Izuku's. He hadn't noticed the hero student was there. "He told me I couldn't, too dangerous for Quirkless. He would know he's a hero. Made me even sadder than what Kaken said. But I'm happy now," Izuku mumbled, yawning. "The station is nice." "Oh wait, Chief Tsurama. Is Ida going to be in trouble?" "They have graciously extended mercy so long as we never tell anyone of my involvement," the student in question said. "I'm glad you're not in trouble," Izuku said excitedly. "Mom, I missed you. Why are you crying?" Unable to hold herself back anymore, Inko flung herself at her son. "Izuku, you're okay? You nearly gave me a heart attack." Izuku merely hummed, grateful for his mother's presence. Tsuramagi left, claiming he would be back later to get his statement. "Mom." "Yes, sweetie?" "What time is it?" Inko checked her watch. "Around 2 in the morning. You should be sleeping." "Oh, I'm fine, Izuku." But Izuku could see how exhausted Inko was, and he was tired himself. "Go to my dorm room, you can sleep there. That way you can grab my stuff in the morning before we leave. Besides, Dr. Meiji will want to see me, so he can come here with you." It took a lot more convincing, but finally Inko agreed to take a cab to the university, leaving Izuku alone with Ida. Izuku was drowsy, but his mind was fully functional once more. The painkillers were starting to wear off, but for now it was bearable. I sincerely apologize, Midoriya, Ida said, breaking the silence. I was a selfish fool. I could only recognize the injustice done to my brother, and if it weren't for your intervention, I would likely be dead. The two boys quietly conversed, while in the hallway, Inko happened upon one frazzled detective. She paused. Tsukachi. The man came screeching to a halt. Inko. Is he okay? He had to have surgery on his leg, but he's fine. He should make a full recovery, Inko said, glad to see the detective. She hesitated before continuing, but he was saying some concerning things when he was recovering from the anesthesia. Like what? Like he should thank Stain because he called Izuku a hero. I hadn't heard anything about this before, but apparently Izuku had a pro-hero tell him he couldn't be a hero, and it hurt worse than everything his bullies told him. Izuku hadn't told me anything about all of this, and I doubt he's going to remember telling me. It worries me, because before your station found him, heroes were Izuku's life. Everything was about finding a way to become one. Tsukachi's eyes were steel. Do you know what hero told him this? Inko thought briefly back to when they moved and Izuku had donated the entirety of his All Might collection. It was highly unusual, but it was probably just Izuku trying to move on from his former dream. Besides, the day of the sludge villain there were a lot of heroes on scene, and there was no guarantee that it was any of them. No. The detective nodded. Thanks for telling me, Inko. Now go get some sleep. You too, she said with a wry smile. Izuku and Ida were deep in conversation when the door slammed open and Detective Tsukachi stormed in, the picture of fury in a trench coat. Midoriya Izuku, I know you didn't just happen to be in the same area of Hosu as Stain. What on earth possessed you to intervene with nothing but 2 police officers and a fanny pack? I also had my EMT pack? Izuku said nervously. Tsukachi collapsed into a chair at his bedside. We're getting you a gun. Really? The hero killer? I'll tell someone my suspicions next time. I was just worried they wouldn't believe me or that we would get there too late, Izuku said. Well, I don't think you have. To worry about that in the future, there's already a whole host of police officers that want to steal you from me, Tsukachi said. Once Mao told me, somehow the entirety of Japan's police force found out that you were the one who took down Stain. Izuku found himself blushing. It's too much. You're well on your way to becoming Japan's favorite police officer, and you're not even officially one yet. But you need to trust in us, kid. We're here to help you, and if you don't start trusting us, you're going to keep getting hurt like this. I'm sorry, Izuku said sincerely, ducking his head. Good, I better not be seeing you in the hospital anytime soon, Tsukachi said seriously. Now I am commandeering this armchair for a few hours, and in the morning, I'm going to pay Mao and Ashia a visit. Izuku yawned. Please don't kill them. I make no promises. Now go to sleep, little Midoriya. I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, but we can't release your son just yet. What? He's okay, isn't he? Inko asked, eyes wide. Yes, he's healing wonderfully, the doctor assured her. But this injury was no small wound. We're lucky that there wasn't more damage done to him. As it stands, I just want to keep an eye on him to make sure that there are no complications. Inko wrung her hands. I understand that, but I can't afford to take any more time off from my job. I can't just leave Izuku alone. And I don't know if I can afford the hospital bills. Izuku bit his lip, trying not to cry as he listened to his mother fret like this. He hated that he was such a burden. He had been the reason that they moved, and she wouldn't tell him how much his online schooling and Valiant's dojo cost, but it couldn't be cheap. Until he became part of the police force, Izuku couldn't contribute. He was merely a drain on his mother. Now here he was, costing more money that they didn't have, and the guilt was eating him alive. Izuku swallowed, wondering if he could work in a part-time job, at least until. Don't worry about that, Mrs. Midoriya, Detective Tsukachi cut in, placing a hand on her shoulder. The police take care of their own. Our insurance policy will cover the costs completely. You can return home if you need to. I know that almost everyone in the station was planning on dropping by here at one point or another, so we can arrange shifts so that your son is never alone. Besides, I am being retained as well, Ida said from his own hospital bed, chopping at the air with his good arm. I shall keep him company as best I can. I'll be checking up on your son as well, Dr. Meiji interrupted quickly. Izuku blinked, completely stunned. They were helping? Just like that? Was this what having more than a two-person family felt like? Or were they helping because they felt guilty? That's not necessary, you shouldn't feel like you have to. Tsukachi put a hand on his head. Reckless teenagers don't get any say in the matter. Izuku squawked in protest, but in actuality his chest was warmer than he could ever recall it being before. Soon after that, the adults fell into a conversation that wasn't so much exclusive as it was boring, so Izuku took advantage of their distraction and stretched as far as his body would allow, finally able to snag his shone that had been tantalizingly out of reach. Tsukachi had stolen it last night, claiming that he needed rest, not a distraction. He was marginally impressed that his phone had any battery left at all, and that it hadn't just malfunctioned from all of the notifications. There were roughly 200 text messages from Officer Saito alone, ranging from berating him for his stupidity to pleading for him to be okay. There were also texts from everyone else on the force, excluding Mori, a handful from various people he knew from the dojo, a dozen emails from various teachers, and a few voicemails. One was from Ojiro, one was from Valiant, and there were two from the same unknown number. Curious, Izuku picked the first one from the unknown number. Holding the phone up to his ear, a vaguely familiar voice began speaking. "Hi, I was just calling to say thank you for my first day of training. You helped a lot and you were super cool. I hope I see you again sometime soon, Midoriya. This is Uraraka Ochako, by the way." Izuku hadn't been aware that his phone slipped out of his hand until it clattered to the floor. The noise alerted everyone else in the room, causing some concern while an utterly smitten smile spread across his face. "Midoriya, are you alright? Do we need to call the doctor? Talk to us, kid." "Izuku, honey, why are you smiling like that? Should I be worried?" He instinctively turned to the most familiar voice. "Girl. A girl. What about a girl, Izuku?" Inko asked, worry creasing her face even more. "What girl?" The door to the hospital room slammed open and none other than Officer Saito stomped in, waving a picture around. "It's this girl, isn't it, Izuku? One Uraraka Ochako, a hero student in UA's Class 1A. You helped her after the USJ incident and then again on Monday at Gunhead's dojo where you gave her your phone number." Izuku whimpered, feeling like a guilty man on trial even though he had done nothing. "No, it's not what you think. Don't you lie to me, little Midoriya. Gunhead told me everything," Saito said, dramatically jabbing a finger at him. "But I'm not angry about the girl, little Midoriya. If anything comes of this, I'll have to instill the fear of the station in her, but she's cute and hopefully smart enough not to hurt you. No, I came all the way to Hosu to address your blatant betrayal." It was then that Officer Nakamura appeared in the doorway, panting. "Sorry, little Midoriya. I tried to rein her in, but she locked me in a janitor's closet and made it here before me." "Betrayal?" Ida asked, scandalized. "You lost our Snapchat streak," Saito declared, seemingly near tears. "And then you didn't confirm your crush to me. You're supposed to divulge your secrets to me. And then you had to get yourself hurt on top of it all." Nakamura wheezed, producing an inhaler and taking a few puffs before snarling, "You need to get your priorities straight. We were almost to 50 days. If I can snap him in the middle of a drag bus to keep the thing alive, then..." "Saito, what have I said about using your phone on the job?" She cursed quietly under her breath. "I forgot that detective was here. Nakamura, why didn't you warn me?" "Grave," Nakamura wheezed, starting to get his breathing under control. The doctor cleared his throat. "I was letting this slide before, but with this many people we should really only have family in the room. I really should get going anyway, office hours are starting soon," Dr. Meiji said regretfully. "Heal quickly, Midoriya. I look forward to your next visit." Once Meiji had departed, the doctor looked expectantly at the others in the room, though mainly Saito. Looking him dead in the eyes with a completely straight face, she said, "He's my brother, can't you see the resemblance?" "How are you, Mom?" she asked, giving Inko a wooden hug. Inko patted the woman who was obviously too old to be her daughter on the back. Normally she would have protested the lie, but it was true in all but blood. The police station were more like family to Izuku than anyone but Inko herself. "And him?" the doctor asked, pointedly looking at Nakamura. "He's our great-uncle," she said without missing a beat. The doctor sighed in resignation. "Just don't get too rowdy." It was then that Ida chose to lean over and whisper, "Are you truly smitten with Uraraka?" Unfortunately, Ida was terrible at whispering, and the entire room heard him. Izuku paled as every eye present came to rest on him. It was his mother of all people that asked, "Izuku, who is this Uraraka Ochako?" Izuku flailed, unsure of how to answer and praying for deliverance. It seemed just then that he had apparently done something right in his life, because it actually came. A nurse stepped in to collect Ida and Izuku to get them out of their room and visit some other patients. At that point, Izuku was ready to fling himself off the bed, but he settled for nodding vigorously while Ida agreed as well. The two were transferred into wheelchairs while Izuku insisted that he and Ida went alone with the nurses until finally they were pushed away from prying eyes. Once out of earshot, Ida said, "I must beg your forgiveness, Midoriya. I was not nearly discreet enough." "Don't worry about it, Ida. And yeah, I think I do like Uraraka. She's one of the first girls I've ever met that didn't care I was quirkless." "She is indeed a person of the highest caliber, as are you," Ida said almost proudly, like a mother hen talking about her chicks. "We're at the first room," one of the nurses announced before pushing the door open. The room was nearly identical to theirs, but only one of the beds was taken, and this room was littered with candy wrappers and the like. From his armchair next to the occupied bed, still chewing on a candy bar, Officer Mao languidly poked Officer Ashia awake while Izuku excitedly said, "It's great to see you both." "I'm glad you're healing well, Officer Ashia." It took a minute for Ashia's eyes to focus enough to see the boys before a smile spread across his face. "Hey, Midoriya. You haven't tried to take down any homicidal maniacs since I last saw you, have you?" "Not yet, but it's not quite lunchtime," Izuku said with a smile. "That was amazing, kid. But a little warning next time?" Mao asked. "I know you probably have experience being doubted because you're a quirkless teenager, but that's not going to be the case anymore. You're the golden child of the police department." "What?" Both officers stared at him. "Haven't you seen the news?" "I made the news?" "Oh, geez," Mao said, picking up the remote and flipping through a few channels. Izuku only caught snippets from each, but it was enough. Hero killer Stain stopped by a quirkless 15-year-old. Some question the legitimacy of the story and whether or not it was all a ploy to raise the public opinion of quirkless individuals. Midoriya Izuku, a quirkless 15-year-old, reportedly accomplished what an abundance of pro-heroes have been unable to. This begs the question, are quirks really helpful, or have we become too reliant on them? Here we have. Taser sales have skyrocketed overnight. Moron. Was just a fluke, a lucky coincidence, Endeavor was saying, staring into the camera. Children, especially defenseless children, should keep out of hero work. Mao turned off the TV. "You're everywhere. Some people love you, some people hate you. Endeavor is said beyond belief, and so he's been attempting to downplay your fight and talk up the strength of those Nomu things. I think he's really just jealous that you took down such a high-profile villain without a quirk." "Jealous?" Izuku squeaked. "For better or for worse, you're making a name for yourself. Your face is being plastered everywhere, both of you. The police as a whole are getting the most positive publicity than we've gotten since the institution of public heroes. This is probably going to be a fleeting thing. In a month you might seem vaguely familiar to someone in the grocery store, but people are going to remember that it was a quirkless kid that took down Stain," Ashia said gravely. "But kid, from what I know of you, this is only the start of one of the brightest careers I've ever seen. I look forward to what you do next. As long as you warn your partners," Mao said immediately and sternly. "Now get out of here. If Ashia doesn't get more rest, his wife will kill both of us." Izuku and Ida bid the two farewell as their nurses pushed them out of the room and further down the hallway. Neither boy asked any questions when they were pushed into a room a few doors down where Native was being visited. By manual. Both heroes were happy to see the boys, but wasted no time telling them that they were reckless and stupid that night. but Native ended by saying, "If it weren't for you two though, I'd be dead, so I have to say thank you." Manuel smiled. "I think you've learned your lesson, Tenya. But thank you, Midoriya. You kept him alive when I couldn't. I hear you want to be a detective, and I think I speak for many heroes when I say that I look forward to working with you." Izuku managed to hold back his tears, but only just. "Me too." He sniffled as they were pushed from the room. He was still trying not to cry when Ida said, "Our room is in the opposite direction, and surely there are no more patients." "Have you forgotten about me so easily, Tenya?" Ida froze at the sound of the newcomer's voice. "Brother?" Izuku glanced around to find a man who looked remarkably like Ida wheeling up in a wheelchair of his own. Ingenium. A harried nurse materialized behind him. "Sir, you're not allowed to be moving about on your own yet." "I just wanted to make sure my brother hadn't forgotten me," Ingenium said with a winning smile. It was roughly about that moment that Izuku felt like his heart was about to explode because holy woe, the Ingenium sat right in front of him. "I could never forget you," Ida said fervently, his eyes shining with tears. "Brother, I must apologize. I thought I was avenging you, but in reality I merely let my anger overwhelm me. I'm so sorry, brother. I have failed to uphold the ideals of heroism that you taught me." Ida was crying in earnest now, but he jolted when his brother placed a comforting hand atop his head. "You acted rashly, Tenya, that's true. But I know you, and you will learn from this and become a better hero than I ever was. You will make Ingenium a hero to look up to." "Thank you, brother, I won't let you down again," Ida said, wiping at his tears. "I know you won't," Ingenium said warmly before his eyes came to rest on Izuku. "And I'm assuming you're the person I have to thank for keeping my brother alive." "Oh, I didn't do much really. But it's an honor to meet you, Ingenium, sir. I've looked up to you for—" Izuku was pulled from what could potentially the most embarrassing mutterstorm of his life when an irritated voice called, "Tensei, I won't bring you to your checkups with your surgeon if you're never where you're supposed to be." Ingenium wheeled around enough to look at the speaker. "Ah, but Shota, I was popping in on my darling little brother and his new friend." Izuku swallowed as none other than Aizawa strolled into view, displeasure clear on his face. "I didn't think I'd get the opportunity to lecture you two so soon. You were both reckless and stupid. Ida, I expect you to learn from this and learn well. You're only alive because Midoriya is a trained EMT, and a good one at that. I trust that you'll rein in your emotions in the future." "Of course, Mr. Aizawa. You have my sincerest apologies. Don't expect the government to take it easy on you. You used your quirk illegally, and there will be a penalty," Aizawa warned. "You were being a vigilante in every sense of the word." Ida hung his head. "I am aware." "And you," Aizawa said, his glare sharpening on Izuku. "I'm sure Tsukachi covered most things already, problem child, but I've spoken with Gunhead and Valiant about methods of countering various types of weapons. The next time I hear that you've taken a sword to the thigh, I'm going to make you wish that the villain had finished the job." "I'll be more careful," Izuku said, furiously nodding. Ingenium's mouth curled even further upwards. "I didn't know you knew the hero of the hour, Shota." "I know him well enough to know that Midoriya didn't stumble across Stain by accident," Aizawa said, his eyes boring into the depths of Izuku's soul. "But I also know he's one of the most capable problem children I've ever come across. I swear, when I find whatever fool of a pro-hero told him he couldn't be one of us, I'm going to hang them upside down with my capture weapon." "That is the highest praise I have ever heard from Aizawa Shota. Take heart, Midoriya. That means that you're doing something incredibly right. Thank you for saving my little brother. I may no longer be able to be a hero, but I can rest easy knowing that I'm leaving the world in the hands of you too," Tensei said with a bittersweet smile. "Now we need to get going. If Shota isn't back by a certain time, his cats will riot and I will be hearing about it for months." Izuku wasn't sure what to feel as he watched Ingenium and Aizawa leave. He was still not completely present, thanks to his pain medication and the poor sleep afforded by hospital beds. He thought about nothing and everything at the same time as he was wheeled back to his hospital room, where he would sit aside Ida for days, making a lifelong friend and ally. In those few days, Izuku was able to pretend he was just a teenager with Ida, as if neither of their pictures were broadcasted across every news channel while millions of strangers formulated opinions of each of them. Each boy was blissfully unaware that the happenings of that fateful night was already changing their nation as it stood, potentially even the world. The specifics and their faces would be widely forgotten, but the emotions behind it all never would. However, the details were not forgotten by all. Many eyes now rested on Midoriya Izuku, for better or for worse. I can see you've been keeping up with your therapy even though Recovery Girl healed you, Aizawa said as he and Izuku circled one another, each waiting for the other to strike first. That's good, you're probably stronger than you were before. Izuku did his best to regulate his breathing, ignoring the sweat sticking his shirt to his body. I have a lot of people who care about my well-being for once, I would hate to let them down. If you recognize that much, you'll do us all a favor and stop taking swords to the thigh. But it's true that you've got an army of people making sure that you reach your full potential, Aizawa said, one of his unsettling smiles spreading across his face. Speaking of that, I showed Nizu your analysis of me and he's intrigued. You did what? In that millisecond of Izuku's surprise, Aizawa struck. After a flurry of motion, Izuku ended up with his face pressed into the practice mat. I think you know what I'm going to say, problem child. Never let my guard down, Izuku groaned, the words muffled. Aizawa let off, even offering a hand to help him up. But I was serious about Nizu. He was already curious about you, but your analysis left him fascinated. Izuku swallowed thickly. He had come to know that the attention of UA's principal was by no means a good thing. So what does that mean? It means we're done for today, Aizawa said, rolling his shoulders. If you're up to it, Nizu has invited you for tea just about now. It's up to you whether or not to accept the invitation, but I would remind you that Nizu has been gracious enough to allow you the use of UA property. As terrifying as the prospect was, Izuku couldn't deny his curiosity. Which way to his office? The principal's office was impressive, but simple as UA in general seemed to be. The principal of indeterminate species glanced up from his paperwork when the door opened. Ah, Mr. Midoriya. I was wondering whether or not you would accept my offer. At the very least I should thank you for allowing me to train on school property with school staff even though I am not one of your students, Izuku said, trying not to sound as flustered as he felt. I've been curious about you ever since I was approached about training you by not only Recovery Girl, but Eraserhead as well, Nizu said, motioning for Izuku to sit down. Naturally, I had also been informed about the new Provisional Police Badge program that currently has exactly one participant, and Dr. Meiji has been bragging about the pupil he snagged out from under my nose. Imagine my surprise when I learned that all of these monumental achievements belong to the same 15-year-old. I can't express how right Meiji is. It really is a shame that I wasn't able to welcome you into UA as one of our students. But no matter, it appears you're being trained properly on multiple accounts. As I'm sure Aizawa told you, I've seen your analysis of him, and I'm fascinated. Would you care for a conversation over tea? I'd be delighted, Izuku said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He'd heard too many stories about the principal for there not to be another shoe. I've heard about you from many people, Midoriya. You've been taken on by a number of pro-heroes that wish to train you, even outside of Eraserhead and Recovery Girl, and you've taken down the hero killer Stain yourself. Why not try to become a hero? Nizu asked. When I was younger I wanted nothing more, Izuku admitted. But there's no way that you don't know that I'm quirkless, Principal Nizu. And there's no way that you don't know by now that you easily could have become a hero without a quirk, Nizu countered. You've easily proven yourself more capable than some of our own Hero Corps students. I have that confidence now, but when I needed it, there were lines of people telling me that becoming a hero wasn't a possibility, including heroes, Izuku said with a bittersweet smile. But I like the path I'm on. As much as I would love it, I know I can't change your mind, Nizu said. Just as I know that you're Meiji's protege. But I would like to ask a favor of you, Midoriya. Yes. I'd like to get to know you better. I understand you're a busy man, so all that I ask is that you make time to have tea with me once a month. I already find myself invested in your future. Oh, of course. I would love to. The longer the conversation went on, the more Izuku found himself relaxing. He had heard plenty of stories about the unsettling feeling that came with the attention of Nizu, but Izuku felt no such discomfort. Nizu was wildly intelligent, yes, but he was perfectly kind and polite to Izuku. Meanwhile, Nizu was becoming more and more intrigued by this child every minute. He was beginning to see the full scope of the true tragedy of Yue never teaching Midoriya Izuku, at least not in any way they could officially take credit for. After all, it was for someone precisely like Midoriya that Nizu had allowed Quirkless children apply to the hero course. When the time came, Nizu reluctantly let the boy go. He was already formulating subtle topics of conversation for next month to learn more about the boy. Midoriya was bright and genuine, and he had a rare strength of character. He was completely selfless in his desire to help people. Indeed, on more than one occasion Aizawa had muttered about the boy getting himself killed. But Nizu knew how quirkless people were treated, especially the ones who refused to stay in the shadows. Nizu felt a strange kinship with Midoriya Izuku, he supposed. The boy bore so many of those signs of someone used and abused by humans, many of those signs that Nizu himself once bore. How the boy was so free of hatred and anger was a mystery, though. If such a creature did exist, surely it deserved better than this world. A knock sounded at the open office door where Aizawa and Chiyo stood. You called for us? Yes. Come in, please. Come in, Nizu said brightly. As you two know him best, tell me a bit about Midoriya Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku sneezed on his walk home. Bless you. Thank you, hey. Shinso. I haven't seen you for a while. The purple-haired boy looked just as exhausted as ever, but he half smiled. If you would stop sacrificing limbs to stop serial killers, then maybe we could find time to hang out. It was only one time, and I had limited options, Izuku said defensively. You people act like I have a secret quirk that causes me injuries. I'm just screwing with you, Midoriya. Really though, I haven't seen you for a while with your gimpy leg and whatnot. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Recovery girl took pity on me and healed me, but she also made me promise to go through physical therapy before I was allowed to spar again. Today was my first day back with Aizawa, and I'm going back to the dojo on Monday. I would say it sounds like you've had some spare time lately, but I know you've just overachieved as usual. I wouldn't call it overachieving. What? Shinso asked, amusement clear in his eyes. You only added another 30 pages to your analysis of Eraserhead, and then you finished high school just because? I still have a term and a half left of high school, Izuku muttered. And I analyzed a lot of people, not just Eraserhead. So you took it easy, Shinso said, completely deadpan. Midoriya, it pains me to say this, but you need to get out more, have some fun. I have fun. Izuku protested. Just last week we had a birthday party for Officer Kondo at the station. I mean fun that doesn't involve people a decade older than us. But Mori is only. No, Midoriya. First of all, he hates you. Besides, if anything, Mori is anti-fun. Izuku thought before grumbling. Okay then, what do you suggest I do for fun? Shinso had the audacity to shrug without looking up from his phone. Don't ask me, I haven't had fun in years. Well then it sounds like you need to go and have fun just as much as I do. What do your friends do for fun? Bold of you to assume I have friends. Well, I know Ojiro trains and Ida also trains, Izuku said slowly. I'm assuming that training isn't counting as fun. Nope. Isn't the mall supposed to be fun? People seem to go there a lot. Shinso wrinkled his nose. The mall? Where hundreds of troglodytes that think themselves superior to you and me flock. Surely this is not the mall that you speak of. You're being dramatic. Tomorrow if you're free, we can go to the mall for a while, and when we get bored, we can go play video games at your house. The two stared one another down before Izuku added, if the mall is awful, I'll pay for lunch. A slow smile spread across Shinsu's face. I believe we have a deal, Midoriya. No super expensive sushi. The two parted with plans to meet the next morning. Izuku was absurdly excited. He had no idea what to do at the mall, He had only been a handful of times with his mom, and that usually consisted of her shoving various clearance clothes at him in a desperate attempt to get him to wear something other than his t-shirt shirts. He doubted this would be like that, but he was going to the mall with a friend. This was even more exciting than the time he'd gone to the arcade with Ojiro. When he got there, Izuku barreled right into his house, and upon finding Inko asked, "Can I go to Themel with Shinsu tomorrow?" Inko blinked. "Say that one more time. Slower. Can I go to the mall with Shinso tomorrow?" She began blinking again, but this time it was blinking tears from her eyes. "Of course you can. My baby, going to the mall with a friend." There were quite a few tears shared between the mother and son, and later that night Izuku could hardly sleep for excitement. For a day he was going to be a normal teenager at the mall with a friend. That said, Izuku woke up absurdly early Saturday morning. He knew Shinso would never stand for being woken up at this time, and the mall wasn't even open yet, so Izuku found himself running to the police station. He could say hi to whoever happened to be on duty. Smiling at the thought, Izuku slowed to a jog, and then a walk when he got to the front entrance into the station. He would need to shower once he got home, and then he could. It's the golden child. Of course you just get up and go for a run at the crack of dawn, because Midoriya actually has his life together. Well, you listen here, you little twerp. People only like you because they feel bad for you. Stain probably. Mori was cut off when Soma slapped a hand over his mouth. Don't pay attention to him, Midoriya. He's a little bitter about having the graveyard shift, and sleep deprivation brings out a different side of him. It makes him honest. At least he's finally off meter maid duty, Izuku said, moving to the water cooler for a drink. Sato's got a betting pool on how long that lasts, Tamakawa said, emerging from the staff room. I'm giving him a week. Mori wrenched Soma's hand from his mouth. Why you even here, kid? I swear you're here more often than I am, and I'm paid to be here. It's pathetic, don't you have friends? Soma tensed, ready to send Mori to the corner, but Izuku just laughed. I'm actually going to hang out with a friend later today. I just woke up early and had time to kill. Besides, I love being here, don't you? The more Izuku spoke, the more Mori looked like he was about to explode. I need either more sleep or more caffeine to deal with this brat. While Mori sat in his corner, of his own volition, Izuku enjoyed tea and donuts with the other officers. Saito brought donuts to the station at least weekly to keep up their image. Izuku stayed like that even after Soma and Mori finished their shift. He simply made more tea and enjoyed it with Sasaki and Kondo when they came in, and later Tsukachi. Sasaki fought Tsukachi for the last of the fritters before asking, "So little Midoriya, how's the police academy treating you?" "Oh, I'm learning tons," Izuku said excitedly, eyes shining. "And since the stain incident, the other students have been leaving me alone." Kondo paused, her teacup halfway to her lips. Her eyes were extra frosty as she asked, "They've been messing with you?" "Oh, nothing as bad as middle school was," Izuku said blithely. "Mostly they would just ignore me, but a few people claimed that I was too young and a waste of resources. Of them found out that I was involved in multiple cases that made the news and tried to convince people that I just wanted to be famous or something." "Why didn't you tell anyone about this before?" Sasaki demanded, her wings fluttering anxiously. "It's no big deal," Izuku said quickly. "Really, it's nothing. I was used to dealing with worse in middle school. Their teasing means nothing if it gets me to my goal. Besides, now I've got all of you guys standing behind me, along with real friends. I couldn't possibly complain about any of that." Izuku stayed and chatted until it was almost time to meet Shinso. He waved goodbye before racing out the door. If he hurried, he would have just enough time to shower. Once Midoriya was definitely out of earshot, Kondo made eye contact with each of her coworkers. "We're going to drop in on some of those police academy trainings, aren't we?" Right after we shut down his middle school for neglect, Tsukachi said, already scribbling notes. "Midoriya is too stubborn to name names, but I'm sure I can find something." While those people at the police station began plotting, Izuku was practically skipping home. It had already started off as a wonderful day, and now he was going to the mall with a friend. What could go wrong? Somehow Shinso looked even more exhausted than usual when he opened the front door. Violet eyes landed on the excited face of Izuku briefly before the door almost immediately closed on his face. Izuku blinked, but before he could really question what had just happened, Shinso reappeared with sunglasses in place. Now I can handle your smile. Let's go, sunshine child. I can't wait, Izuku said, practically bouncing along the pavement. Are you going taser shopping? You'd probably get some free stuff. A new self-defense store opened in the mall, and they say that you're the reason business is booming. They even sell those awful fanny packs that you love so much, Shinso said, eyeing the offensive article in question. It was a gift, he said, adjusting the Save My Fanny Pack. He preferred that name, especially when he was wearing it with one of his labeled t-shirts. It fit with the puns on them. He just had to be careful to call it the Don't RPE Me kit in front of Saito and Sasaki. It looks like a bruised banana fused onto your waist, Shinso deadpanned. What was that? You want one for Christmas? Midoriya, you wouldn't, Shinso said in a warning voice. Izuku said nothing, only walking faster. Worried, Shinso also picked up the pace. Midoriya, get your broccoli butt back here. Breaking into a run, Izuku sprinted through the mall entrance, expertly dodging the hordes of people. But Shinso wasn't far behind. Dashing around the mall courtyard, he turned back to taunt. I think lime green would really make your eyes pop. Midoriya, I swear I'm going to watch out. Just as Shinso called out, Izuku felt, or rather, didn't feel his foot strike the ground. Kid survived the sludge villain, a kidnapper, and even the hero killer, but he was going to meet his end via stairs. Izuku readied himself for the fall that would break a bone and finally make the police station get him a protective bubble, but it never came. He hadn't realized he closed his eyes until he opened them back up. He felt odd, weightless, and standing in front of him was. Sorry I just used my quirk like that, said Uraraka. I figured you wouldn't want to fall. Oh, I know you. Hi Midoriya. Izuku easily got his feet under him once more and she released her quirk, returning Izuku's world back to normal. Thanks for the save, your quirk really is amazing. Izuku gushed, hoping his face wasn't as red as it felt. I mean, I already knew that, but… Hey, Midoriya, Ojiro interrupted, sensing that he was about to get lost in a more embarrassing tangent than usual. What brings you to the mall? Izuku cleared his throat, thankful for the direction in conversation. Oh, nothing in particular, I just had free time for once, so I convinced Shinso to come with me, he trailed off awkwardly, suddenly noticing the palpable tension between the 1A students and Shinso. The boy in question didn't bother to take off his sunglasses, he just lazily glanced at them over the frames. At ease, one. I'm not here to fight you. Besides, Midoriya is a bit of a stickler for following quirk laws. I suppose your class is here to get ready for your mysterious summer camp. He had recognized a few students from 1A, but seeing the majority of the class there made Izuku's mouth go dry. Oh, you must be waiting for your other classmates, then? Just Ashido and Tokoyami, Ojiro said. Bokugu and Todoroki aren't coming. A redhead with remarkably sharp teeth broke into the conversation before anyone but Ojiro and Shinso could pick up on Izuku's relief. Midoriya, you're the guy that took down Stain, aren't you? That's super manly, bro. How do you know Ojiro and Uraraka? He was one of the EMTs after the USJ incident. He was super nice. Hagakure said, startling a few people around her. Midoriya goes to the same dojo as me, Ojiro said in his calm manner. And he helped train me at my internship, Uraraka said brightly. Oh wow, you must be really good then, said a blonde standing just a tad too close to the earphone jack girl. Duh, he took down Stain, she said, her jacks forming a cross to ward him off. As the class fawned over Midoriya, Ochako stood back and observed. The boy seemed more confident than the last time she'd seen him, but she felt the need to thank him. Even more, she felt the need to know him, to be his friend. It was strange and rare, but unexplainable. Tenya watched Uraraka watching Midoriya and felt duty-bound to give Midoriya the opportunity to at least talk to the girl alone, yet in an appropriate setting such as this. When there was a lull in the conversation, he broke in, hand chopping the air with each syllable. Midoriya, you and Uraraka should take this opportunity to get to know one another outside of a professional capacity, as you have been able to with Ojiro and myself. This appears to be extremely fortuitous timing. Ooh, like a date? Ashido asked, appearing out of nowhere and startling Izuku. Who's the green bean? BB, but I came here with Shinso, Izuku said in a panicked mutter, his arms contorting into crazy shapes as he sought to hide his red face. I can't just leave him alone. Shinso could accompany me while I seek out more durable glasses frames. I would rather die. Or we could all meet up afterwards, perhaps to get a healthy smoothie. Ida said proudly, ignoring Shinsu's comment altogether. Smoothies sound good, Kirishima said. Ashido looked around helplessly. Seriously, who is Midoriya? How does everyone know this kid but me? Izuku and Shinso parted ways with 1A, much to their relief. Izuku knew exactly what Ida was trying to do, and while he appreciated it, it was bad for his heart. He just knew if they stayed any longer he would make a complete fool of himself. At least Ida hadn't attempted to whisper anything to him. Shinso was just glad to get away from Class 1A. The two wandered the mall, looking at anything that intrigued either of them, which translates to anything that interested Midoriya. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but Shinso made it no secret that Midoriya would be buying him lunch. When Shinso still showed complete apathy an hour or so later, Midoriya looked a bit like a kicked puppy. He'd stopped teasing Shinso about buying him a Save My Fanny pack. He really still couldn't say, "Don't RPE me kit," without blushing. But now Midoriya looked like he was about to cry, and Shinso didn't know if he was emotionally equipped to deal with that. I'm sorry I made you come with me, I just thought we should do something fun while we both had time. I'll text Ida and tell him we had to leave early and… Hey, it's fine Midoriya, Shinso said, cutting off the other boy's mumbling. I'm actually enjoying this more than I thought I would. I just don't know how to deal with people. Or emotions. It's a miracle I haven't scared you off yet. Izuku sniffed. You promise you're not just saying that? Nah, I wouldn't lie to you. Hey, we should go into that shop. I can get something for that blonde JRK from 1A. Just made sure it's not traceable, Izuku said, feeling a bit better as they made their way towards the joke shop in question. I would hate to have to solve your murder. Shinso squinted at him. You seem to be very well informed on Mr. Compensates with explosions. Ooh, look, they've got Chinese finger traps on sale. Izuku said brightly. Apparently these are specially made to withstand minor strength enhancement quirks. Nice subject change. Hand me that powder that apparently makes everything you eat taste like radishes by your hand. The two spent quite some time in the joke shop until Izuku noticed the food court rapidly filling up. Shinso, I'm going to buy my stuff and go get a table for us. I'll meet you there. Fine, go make sure everything is perfect for your date, he replied. Though are you really buying 20 Chinese finger traps? It's not a date, Izuku muttered, red staining his cheeks. Semantics. Go make Space Girl proud. Still blushing, Izuku scuttled away, clutching his purchases close to his body. He likely would have skipped though the mall if there had been less of a crowd. As it stood he was jostled back and forth, and he worried about finding a table until he saw there was a pocket in the food court that was practically uninhabited. He just had to claim it. He had to hustle, but Izuku made it to the largest table the area offered before anyone else could. He grinned happily. It would be fun to have smoothies with his friends at the mall. Part of him almost didn't believe that any of this day was happening. It had seemed like maybe he would never get to experience these normal teenager things. There was some time before everyone would get there, so Izuku pulled out his phone. Dr. Meiji had had some feedback on his last analysis, and he hadn't gotten the chance to read it yet. He was so absorbed in reading it that Izuku didn't realize anyone was near until that person sat directly next to him and rasped, "Wow, I recognize you. You're that kid from the news, the quirkless boy who stopped Stain." Izuku's head jerked up, his eyes meeting the man's red ones framed by pale blue hair. He couldn't help but notice how dry and cracked the man's lips were, which was somehow his most distinguishing characteristic. An uneasy feeling settled into Izuku's gut, but he took care to breathe steadily and deeply even as the man slung an arm over his shoulders. That was quite the accomplishment, taking down Stain with nothing but your little pack. It was all the media could talk about for weeks. It must be so frustrating for you. They still talk about him, but you've been forgotten or mocked by the public, along with the other things that happened in Hosu that night. Drawing as far away from the man as he could, Izuku slowly asked, "You mean those Nomu things that attacked the city that night?" The man had some nervous tics, and one of them seemed to be playing with the neck of his hoodie, fingers curled like he wanted to scratch at his neck. The neck of his hoodie was frayed and no. The edge of the fabric wasn't frayed, the fabric was flaking away in a pattern that he had only seen once before. Images of Aizawa's destroyed elbow flashed through his mind. This was not good. "Oh, you remember at least. Tell me, Quirkless boy, you've been pretty mistreated, haven't you? Even after you were the one to take down Stain, he gets all of the attention and praise. Doesn't it just pisses you off?" Reaching for his fanny pack was too noticeable, too obvious, and as 4 fingers came to rest on his throat, Izuku swallowed heavily. It couldn't make or cause any abrupt movements, not without losing his esophagus. Aizawa had been happy to explain this particular quirk to him. "It definitely pisses me off," the man continued, despite Izuku's failure to respond. "But we could fix that for you. Are you trying to reform society or something?" Izuku asked, his fingers silently snaking into his bag. "Well, yes, but I was talking about your quirklessness," he said as if it meant nothing. "I should introduce myself. I do want us to be comrades, after all. I'm Shigaraki Tamura, leader of the League of Villains," Izuku interrupted. "So you've heard of me," Shigaraki said with a grin that showed too many teeth. "I've taken an interest in you, Midoriya. Do you know why that is?" Izuku found what he wanted in the bag, holding it steady in the hand that wasn't in Shigaraki's direct line of sight. He had one shot at this. If he screwed up, he was definitely dead, and it would inevitably endanger countless civilians as well. Trying to sound normal, he asked, "No, why are you interested in me?" "Because we're the same, Midoriya," he rasped. "Abused, overlooked, neglected by heroes." "So what are you proposing?" Izuku asked, his voice deceptively calm and confident. "Join us. Join us and you'll have the power and the quirk to get back at everyone, even the heroes that have failed you." In his passion, Shigaraki's grip on Izuku's throat loosened. Time seemed to slow down, each of Izuku's heartbeats pounding through his body. He struggled to keep his mind calm, taking a few deep breaths before he struck. Moving as quickly as his body allowed, one hand wrenched back the finger that wasn't resting on Izuku's neck while the other hand jammed a Chinese finger trap onto that finger. While the man yelled in surprise, Izuku's hand darted out and snatched the first finger he could on Shigaraki's other hand, brutally shoving it into the other end of the trap. "What do you think you're doing, brat? I can." Before Shigaraki could even really threaten Izuku, he shoved a second Chinese finger trap onto the man, cementing Izuku's temporary safety. Fury lit Shigaraki's eyes, a feral fury that made Izuku shake in his seat. "I'll kill you, Midoriya. I'll find everything and everyone." "Yo, who are you, some crusty creep that likes to prey on young boys?" A new voice broke in. "How dare you, Aoki? Step away from Midoriya and shut up," Shinso commanded in a flat voice. When Shigaraki did as commanded with a vacant stare, Izuku put as much distance between the two as possible, breathing deeply, trying to keep his tears from falling. "What did he do, Midoriya?" "He was trying to recruit me," Izuku said. "I need to call Tsukachi." Is that the leader of the League of Villains?" Ida hissed in a whisper, which meant that only people within a 10-foot radius heard. The members of 1A that had just gotten to the table gasped and began asking questions all at once as Midoriya began babbling into the phone. Their noise only grew, and Shinso felt his eye twitch a few times. "All of you shut up. Ojiro, you know Midoriya best. Comfort him. Class president, go get mall security," Shinso commanded before prying the phone out of Izuku's hand. "Detective, this is Shinso Hitoshi." "Shinso, what's going on?" a frantic Tsukachi demanded over the phone. "I couldn't make out what Midoriya was trying to tell me." "Hey, Pikachu, don't you dare touch the crusty dude," Shinso hissed at Kaminari, who was curiously sidling a little too close to Shigaraki. "Detective, you should probably get to the mall as quickly as possibly. It appears that Midoriya has caught the leader of the League of Villains in a Chinese finger trap. By the time Shinso had explained all he could and hung up, Ojiro had Izuku calmed down and Ito was coming back with 2 mall cops in tow. A handful of the 1A students had actually made themselves useful and begun herding people away from the area. Midoriya, should I release my quirk to avoid legal ramifications, or command him to come along peacefully? Technically, any unauthorized public quirk use is illegal. I would let it go and we'll all just conveniently forget that it ever happened, Izuku said, meeting eyes with the various members of 1A. Ojiro watched, fascinated as Shigaraki immediately transformed into a screaming, flailing child. As the mall cops descended, Ojiro said, I have to apologize, Shinso. I see now that I judged you and your quirk on my own ideas of being a hero. You're just doing the best you can, just like the rest of us. I'm glad Midoriya could see past that when I couldn't. Please don't start crying, Shinso said. But I judged you a little too harshly too. Thanks for helping Midoriya. Izuku glanced between the two with shining eyes until Shinso deadpanned, We're not going to hug it, that's what you were waiting for. I don't know if we should be more concerned for little Midoriya when he gets here or the detective, Saito said as she filed papers. Tamakawa looked up from polishing his bell collar. Why should we be worried about the detective? Saito glanced around, lowering her voice to a whisper. Nakamura told me she found a receipt for like 12 bottles of antacids. You didn't hear this from me, but Tsukachi might be on his way to another ulcer. But he hasn't had one since. But the cat-headed officer was interrupted by the door opening to reveal the smiling face of Midoriya Izuku. Good morning, Saito, Tamakawa. How are you two today? Little Midoriya. We're Chinese finger traps? Tsukachi roared, emerging from his office. You nearly died at the hand of the leader of the League of Villains, and you bet your life on Chinese finger traps? Yes. Izuku squeaked. Let's calm down, detective, Tamakawa said gently. It was actually brilliant on Midoriya's part. Brilliance doesn't do anything if it pisses off someone enough to kill you, Tsukachi said, shaking Izuku by the shoulders. It wouldn't matter if we had kept him in custody, but he never even made it to police custody. He disappeared before anyone could arrive on the scene. A woman Izuku had never met before appeared from Tsukachi's office, smacking the man. That wasn't the kid's fault. He did more than his part. Just tell the kid he did a good job. I have every right to worry. I don't know what I'd do if. Naomasa, shut up, the woman said, menacingly adjusting her incredibly thick-lensed glasses. I know exactly how you feel, it's called being a parent. But you're turning into a helicopter parent, which is not healthy. Now tell the kid he did well. Izuku frantically waved his arms. Oh, that's not necessary. Detective Tsukachi is right, I can be reckless and… Midoriya, it was well done, I just can't help but worry about you, Tsukachi interrupted, gently placing a hand on his shoulder once more. The boy stared at the detective a few moments before promptly bursting into tears. Saito told me the kid was a crier, but I didn't expect it to be this bad, the woman said. Anyway, it's nice to meet you. Midoriya. I'm Detective Kimura. I specialize in investigating homicides, but I'm currently away on maternity leave. Tsukachi just wanted a second opinion on a case, though I'm glad I got to meet you. You've heard of me? Izuku asked, eyes still watering. Oh, I feel like I already know you. Everyone has told me so much about you, all of it good except what Mori says. But I've never liked him anyway. You too, Kimura? Seriously? Mori called from his corner. Anyway, I look forward to working together. I've got to go, and Naomasa has some things to talk to you about, Kimura said with a kind smile. Saito, you can accompany me to my car and clean up the Vaseline you smeared under the door handles. How did you know? Saito demanded. I'm a mother. I see all. While Saito squabbled with Kimura, Tsukachi waved Izuku into his office. Once inside, Tsukachi ran a hand through his hair. Kimura is right, you did incredibly well at the mall considering the circumstances. It just bothers me that it happened at all. You shouldn't constantly be in danger like this. But I need to learn to accept that it will only get worse from here. Izuku bit his lip, worries he'd push down coming to the surface. Tsukachi? When Shigaraki was talking to me, he said some things I didn't say in my report. Oh. The detective straightened, his eyes serious. I'm sure you had good reason. It was just a feeling, Izuku said hesitantly, and Naomasa was instantly concerned. In his time with the boy, he'd been happy to see how confident he'd grown. It had been obvious, in the beginning, that this strange, wonderful boy had been hurt beyond what he should have been able to handle. And in that one sentence, they were back to square one. I trust your judgment, Naomasa said firmly. He bit his lip before nodding. Shigaraki said we were the same, we were both looked down on by society and forgotten by heroes. He wanted me to join him, and he offered me power and a quirk. I know that's not possible, but for a minute it sounded really good. Tsukachi felt his heart stutter at the boy's words. It couldn't be no. They weren't sure that All for One was alive, it was just a suspicion because of those Noma things, and he refused to entertain the idea that All for One was so close to Midoriya. For a moment, I wanted it, Izuku confessed, tears overflowing. I wanted to show everyone that I wasn't just a useless Deku, prove it to my classmates and teachers, and even the heroes that told me I could never be one of them. He was crying in earnest now, and the detective didn't know what to do other than to embrace the boy. Now more than ever he wanted to take away Izuku's pain, make the people who had hurt him realize the full extent of what they'd done. But he couldn't do anything about that now. I don't know everything about your past, Midoriya, but anyone would have felt that way. But I know you would never do anything like that, Midoriya. You more than anyone are motivated by the simple desire to help people. You're already more of a hero than everyone who told you these things. The boy's tears had already soaked through Naomasa's shirt, but it was of no consequence. They stayed like that until Izuku was composed again. He pulled back, discreetly wiping his eyes. What did you need to tell me, Tsukachi? So this is sudden, but Tsuragami has decided on your next training placement. He wants you to get a more holistic view of police work, so he's sending you to a rural station on Monday. We've already gotten permission from your mother, by the way. How rural are we talking? Like, do I need to finish all of my assignments before I go because I won't have internet? Not quite that rural. Besides, they're going to start training you to properly shoot a gun, so please actually sleep, don't stay up all night doing homework. But the area is just rural enough to pack carefully, because you won't be finding any stores close by. Their crime rate is nearly zero, which means you only have a 50% chance of getting involved in villain activity, Tsukachi said, only half joking. So is there anything special I need to bring? Definitely the fanny pack, but just bring the normal stuff. Izuku raised an eyebrow. So you won't take a stance on the whole don't RPE me kit versus the save my fanny pack controversy? I think Save My Fanny Pack is incredibly clever, but I also have a healthy fear of Saito. Fair enough. If that's all you have to tell me about, why don't you fill me in on Detective Kimura? I've only heard stories from Saito and Sasaki, but she didn't seem as intense as they made her out to be. Tsukachi paused, surreptitiously glancing around his office. It didn't appear that Kimura had bugged the room again in her short time there, but he better choose his words carefully. Regardless, Kimura is quite possibly Japan's best homicide detective, and unlike me, she doesn't have a quirk that helps in investigation. When she officially comes back, you should definitely ask her about her quirk. You'll love it. But I'm getting sidetracked. She already likes you, which is good, because she'll be able to teach you some of the most valuable things you'll ever learn about police work. Just never, and I repeat never, get in between her and Saito during one of their prank wars. They will team up and then we'll never hear from you again. Izuku swallowed, slowly nodding. The two chatted for a while longer, but the boy's news still weighed heavily on the detective. When the boy left, he was smiling again, saying, I better get home now. We're having Kirimi and her mother over for dinner tonight. Naomasa watched him go before lowering his head into his hands. He stayed like that for a few minutes, processing, until he finally picked up his phone. It only rang a few times before the other person picked up. What can I do for you, Naomasa? Tashinori, we need to meet somewhere discreet, I have some important information. As in, state secret type of information? Toshinori asked hesitantly. That would be the type. Let's meet at the school. The only person that might overhear is Nizu. When Tsukachi left his office walking with a clear purpose, even Mori knew not to question him. To work at their station meant a quiet acceptance that Tsukachi knew things and people he never talked about. It wasn't very common, but the man was known to rush to random places with little to no warning. It worried his subordinates. They had gleaned a bit of information over the past few years, and it was just enough for them to worry about whether or not the detective would come back alive. Naomasa had similar feelings about Toshinori. He desperately wanted to yell at the man, force him to be at least marginally less reckless. But if he did that, he knew Toshi would simply shut him out, just as he'd done to Gran Torino and Sir Night-Eye. His friendship with Toshi was one of his most treasured relationships, but it wasn't an easy one. Naomasa internally acknowledged this as he waited at UA's gates for someone to let him in. A few minutes passed, and then none other than the number 1 hero walked up, his emaciated face serious. What is so urgent, Naomasa? What have you found? The detective ushered Toshi forward. He refused to have this conversation anywhere there was even a chance of being overheard. Toshinori understood the concept of a state secret, but his life consisted of them. Besides, years of being the most powerful had made him somewhat lax, or perhaps overconfident. The hero didn't tell him everything, but it was obvious to the detective that All Might needed to find a successor sooner rather than later. They found themselves in something not dissimilar to an interrogation room. It felt a little odd to sit across from Toshinori in such a setting, but there was no time to dwell on that. He's back, and he's active, Naomasa said point blank. The League is almost definitely affiliated with All for One. What makes you so sure? What have you found? We've managed to keep it out of the news, but when your students were at the mall, so was Shigaraki Tamura. Before you ask, no, he didn't target or harm any of them. Instead he targeted Midoriya Izuku, the boy who took down Stain. Toshinori's hands clenched into fists. Is the boy all right? What happened? Midoriya is fine, he's got immense amounts of luck and intelligence. He actually captured Shigaraki, but the villain escaped from mall custody. I'm more concerned about the fact that Midoriya says that Shigaraki was trying to recruit him, and he even went so far as to offer the boy a quirk. Toshinori gasped. Do you think the boy would join them? He made such an impact in taking down Stain. If the boy joined the League of Villains, public opinion of heroes would take a hit. Naomasa felt an unusual spark of anger at his friend's question. His mind flashed to an injured Midoriya babbling about people telling him he could never be a hero. I am more likely to join the League of Villains than Midoriya ever would be. But you need to get serious, Toshinori. Your time as the symbol of peace may not be gone, but it's winding down. You need to find a successor soon enough that you can train them before it's too late. Naomasa, I trust your instincts. I won't try to tell you who to choose as your successor, but right now, All for One and Shigaraki are doing whatever they please. Naomasa paused, a small smile gracing his face as he thought of Midoriya, the joy and energy that he brought to the station. He knew the kind of life All Might led. He had once seen it as inspiring, but now he saw the overwhelming loneliness his friend had trapped himself in. When you do find that person, Toshi, do me a favor and let them in. I've only realized just how lonely I was, and how much a better person I've become from having someone really close to me. Besides, the chances are that they need you almost as much as you need them.